Right, start recording in three, two, and one. All right, and welcome back to the Reserve Squad Midweek Show, a soccer podcast covering all things in the EPL from a bench perspective. I'm here, Spin, and this is your Week 22 review show. Been away for a bit. We had the FA Cup last week, and I know it is Friday, and they're about to restart again. But I did want to get my thoughts on what happened in the midweek, and also the leading story. Basically, a week ago, last Friday, when the Klopp news broke, I haven't been able to speak about that, and so honestly, this entire show could have just been a Liverpool special. Uh, and I try to have some restraint. I do sometimes go a little overboard. Uh, I but I do want to touch on a little bit with the Klopp news and really what Klopp has just kind of meant to me as a fan following the club. It's not his last game, so I don't necessarily have to go like too overboard. But I just figured it would be appropriate to do that. But before I do that, I do want to touch on what happened yesterday. It was a little too late for me to just do or it's too quick a turnaround to do like kind of a full depth take, well, with both Man United and Wolves game and the Bournemouth and West Ham game. I guess leading off with the Bournemouth game, Solanke gets an early goal, I think in the third minute, and James Ward-Prowse is able to get a PK. Not a ton happened as far as just kind of action goes. It could have been just a situation of, but both teams were getting players back that had been away for a bit. Bournemouth got Semenya back. West Ham got Kudus back, and West Ham a little disappointing to not see a little better performance because you had West Ham. You had a. I mean, they're still missing Paqueta, but you had Kudus, you had Bowen. It was the debut for Calvin Phillips, and you kind of wanted to see maybe a little bit more, though. Getting a point versus Bournemouth is a pretty good point because, as we talked about last week, Bournemouth are a pretty good side at the moment, and so that's not terrible. They're able to come from behind to do it as well. And then with the Man United and Wolves game, this game was bonkers. This this game could have been, to be honest, going into like the 90th minute. My takeaway from it was this game could have been 7-0 or it could be 2-2 going into this. I mean, Man United started on fire, and it was. I think the talk at halftime was kind of the same thing with everyone on NBC. They were just wondering, is it a problem that Man United aren't like 5-0 up or goals ahead because of how dominant they were? Wolves, I don't even think had really registered a shot, or at least forced Onana to make any significant save in that first half. But that's kind of the thing when it is just a two-goal game. Once you get into mid 60 minute or so, that can get a team to kind of believe in themselves. Gary O'Neill has shown he's quite good at making second half adjustments, and he brought on a couple players to change the game. He brought on Ait who is better than Matt Doherty on the ball. He brought in Yel Gomez late. He brought in, I think it was Sarabia, and Wolves were significantly, yeah, they posed a significant more of a threat. They were able to get Man United kind of stagnant. Man United were uh, less good in possession in that second half, and there were turnovers, and Wolves were able to break. And the second half kind of reminded me of the first meeting between these two teams when Wolves had. Wolves basically looked like a video game in that first game of the season when Acuna, it was Mateus Nunes that game, or Neto were just able to get the ball in space and just kind of carry it past Man United defenders. And in the second half, we saw that again. And the couple of times when Wolves were able to actually get a ball to just flash across the goal when it seemed like it easily could have been 2-2. And Man United had a number of missed chances. I think they even put the ball in the net four times. I believe a couple offsides calls called that off. But it did the game completely flipped from the first half to the second half, where Man United just were really, really good. You were starting to wonder, well, this is maybe what Ten Hag was working with last season. We saw Luke Shaw working out. We saw Rashford and Hoyland are working together for that first goal. We saw Casemiro coming back and dropping when they were doing build up. We saw them much better with Lisandro Martinez in the squad. Basically, Ten Hag had his full, probably his preferred back line, maybe for the first time this season, to be honest. And all of a sudden, I mean, the takes had to have completely flipped because of how good they looked in that first half, and then how this completely combusted on them in the second half. And then, Wolves were able to get a PK to make it, 2-1, and then I believe Ten Hag took off Casemiro. You understand maybe he's on like a minutes restriction, but brought on McTominay. And online, I know Man United fans were freaking out about this because this is similar. This is a similar situation what happened in the Nottingham Forest game. And McTominay came in and immediately scored off a corner kick to make it a 3-1 kind of game again. And but Wolves were still able to pose a threat, and it seemed like as the game like went on, Cunha and Pedro Neto just seemed to have a little bit more belief in themselves to be able to actually run at this back line, run through that midfield, and they kept getting some chances, and they were able to get a corner kick, I think, in the 85th minute, and lo and behold, Man United weren't able to defend it. There's a little luck involved, but Wolves were able to. I think the ball fell to like Max Kilman, and he had a nice knee to collect it, and then was able to knock it past. And then Ten Hag did something very strange once it got to the 90th minute. So first, seeing that Wolves fans seeing that there are 9 minutes of added extra time, that probably gave everyone in the stands a belief that the comeback could still be on. That probably really upset Ten Hag's group. And what's weird is for the first 4 or 5 minutes, I thought Man United were actually seeing the game out pretty well. They were able to draw a bunch of free kicks. They were able to basically stall the game out. Ten Hag used two subs. He brought on Harry Maguire to maybe kill some minutes. He brought on Johnny Evans to maybe kill some minutes. But at the same time, he took off Rasmus Højlund. He had taken off Rashford at this point, and he took off Lisandro Martinez, and he took off Casemiro. And you looked, and it was just it was not. Wolves probably saw those changes and thought, Man United are not going to be able to go long. They're not really going to have outlets now. Uh, Maybe you can install some pressure. Maybe if you get Pedro Neto and Cunha on a run, and you get past maybe Mano, you can go at Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans, and that's basically what happens. Anthony tries to do a little too much, and instead of going to the sideline, he tries to beat a man. He loses the ball, and it's a counter. And all it takes is just one pass to just completely take out Man United's entire team. Pedro Neto basically has Rafael Varane in a 1v1 situation, top of the box, and Varane isn't able to deal with it, and he opens his legs up, and Pedro Neto threads it through his legs to beat Onana. I can't really go at Onana for this. He looks a little foolish, but this is what Kevin De Bruyne did just a couple of weeks ago. It's basically the same kind of finish. So he probably sees it late and just goes through his legs, and at that point, you're wondering, wow, Man United, this is a disaster result because it didn't feel like it should have ended this way. And then lo and behold, probably really one of their players of the season, even though he only rejoined back in November or December, has been Kobe Mano. He's come in and changed them, and he's basically a player that he's good in possession. He's kind of a defensive minded player, holding player. He showed he's got some skills to his game as well, and man, do they need it! I mean, he has a great nutmeg in the beginning, and then he has a couple dribbles to be able to beat a couple other Wolves defenders. He beats like 5 players on this, and then he gets top of the box and he sees the goal is open, and he goes for a curler and nails it. And he saves Ten Hag a little bit. I'm not going to say Ten Hag would fired, but the fans would have been just absolutely melting down because you probably would have looked at the decisions that Ten Hag made as things that allowed Wolves to have some belief and get back into the game. Taking off the better midfielders and defenders, taking off your attackers to be able to stretch the back line. That allowed Wolves to maybe have some belief. So it wasn't necessarily the best decision making from Ten Hag. But that said, when you look at the game entirely in its entire context, you have to include what they looked like in the first half, and they did look good. So I think there can be some reasons for Man United fans to somewhat be a little more hopeful, at least in what they saw. I mean, going into the game too, there was a lot of talk about Rashford being disciplined. He wasn't able to play, or yeah, he was left out intentionally in their FA Cup game on the weekend. Apparently, he was partying, and that disrupted what Ten Hag wanted to do. But 5 minutes into the game, he scored, and he looked pretty fresh. I think another thing that happened was I thought I saw, because you saw it for the second goal. my Luke Shaw theory really did pan out. Rashford was getting on the ball, and there would be kind of times when it seemed like Wolves actually had him kind of pinned down pretty good. And then Luke Shaw made an overlap, and this is basically what leads to the second goal. Rashford plays him in, and it's just a really easy square ball into the box, and that's where Hoyland gets his second goal. So that was positive. I think Casemiro and Lisandro Martinez and Mano and I looked much better building possession from the back. It wasn't just they had Wolves goal necessarily threatened the entire first half. I mean they did as well, but they had control in this game in a way they just hadn't in many games. So and unfortunately for them, they weren't able to continue that in the second half. So that kind of threads up that, and then I will get started with the Klopp news. And again, I don't want to spend a ton of time. I think the last show I did, I was even talking about Liverpool 2.0, and it was after the Fulham game, after Liverpool had made the final to the Carabao Cup, made another final. They've got a 5 point lead in the league. They've got a big game this week versus Arsenal. They've been able to win despite missing Salah, despite missing a lot of players this season. You haven't had Trent Alexander-Arnold for a lot of this, and lo and behold, they've maybe grown a homegrown star in that stretch, which I'll get to. But my initial reaction to this was I went to bed the night before thinking, yeah, a quadruple was honestly in the cards, and then this I went to bed thinking Klopp has energy again. There have been he's smiling again. Now there've been some uh, I guess not negative reactions, but confrontations in some post games. He hasn't been happy with the way that the schedule has panned out. Liverpool have been playing a bunch of early kickoffs on Saturday after long international breaks, and Liverpool have a bunch of South American players, and that's been a sticky situation. It messed with the rest and sleep schedule, but for the most part, he's been smiling, and everything has looked good again. Because the crazy thing is had this news come out last season, I think everyone would have been expecting it or accepted it. And because last season it did look like it was too much for him. Last season there were a lot of uh, fears that basically a lot of the rumors that Klopp couldn't do this without Michael Edwards were kind of coming true. Uh, the kind of transition from that losing the sporting director to Klopp having a little bit more say in roster decisions and team development, or I shouldn't say that transfer business was he to a fault. He's loyal to his players. He's loyal to the guys that stormed the beaches with him essentially, and to a fault that he would have taken Henderson, I think, this season if the club hadn't have sold him. Same with Milner potentially. And last season he wasn't able to do what he wanted, what he wants his team, or what he asked his team to do. So I think that was hearing this news last season. I think everyone would have kind of understood it. But the more you think about it, I think it makes sense. And the reason why I say that is he maybe sees the selling point of going on a high than necessarily a low, and that's what by basically he is allowing himself to do at the end of the season, as opposed to last year. He probably would have hated to walk away, and I think there's been some comments that he maybe would have if not for his wife basically telling him to keep on, and so what I want to do from there is just kind of talk about how just as a fan, I've just grown accustomed to just Liverpool being able to out physical teams, outplay them, outrun them, and at the same time, basically from like March to April, even in like the seasons that were quote unquote down years, he's just found a way to like win every game and play some of the most exciting football possible. And I don't necessarily feel too spoiled of a fan because while I did join them a little late in my teen years, I remember fondly of the Stuart Downing, the Fabio Borelli, Andy Carroll, Charlie Adam, Robbie Keane, Alberto Aguilini. Before there was Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold, there was Nathaniel Klein, who was a good player, but he was always injured, and Alberto Firmino. Instead of Virgil van Dijk, there would be Carlo Torre at like 39 years old. There was like Sissoko, I believe. It's just the team that basically he came into was not this team. But another thing too is I feel privileged to just if you're neutral, just like watching Liverpool play over the years, you've gotten a way to learn a better understanding of like pressing zones, counter pressing, spaces in behind, how that works, runs in behind. Klopp was one of the few managers that really did recognize early on he didn't want a number 10 kind of player. He didn't. Uh, and Bielsa's kind of talked about that. With teams that just rely on one player to be brilliant, what happens when that player can't necessarily find that magic? You're reliant on basically one just kind of brilliant player, and Klopp basically decided to use midfielders for a different role, and he saw that someone like a Coutinho didn't necessarily work in his kind of system, and that along with, in the beginning, he didn't necessarily like Sturridge because of what he didn't offer without possession. One of the first things he did coming in as manager was to play Firmino as this false nine. In the beginning, I didn't know what a false nine was, when this was going on, and I didn't necessarily like it, to be honest, because Firmino wasn't really leading to goals. But that was just like the beginning of just him just understanding a way to change the game. You lose Coutinho, and they go on and basically make the Champions League final that season. Now, a lot of it was just Salah being brilliant on his own, but he just found a way to make a midfield into a workhorse, into an engine room. It wasn't necessarily about necessarily being brilliant and creating themselves. The idea was prevent the team from being able to counter on you, press the team into mistakes, win the ball, and just get it to attackers' feet, and then allow Salah and Mane to just be individually brilliant to create your goals. Maybe ask Firmino to set up a little bit, and that basically was how this went on. But I think another thing too is the speaking about like the decision making sense. I think he sees a lot of changes on the horizon. Salah's contract situation isn't necessarily resolved. There are state-owned clubs that are just spending endless sums of money, and now maybe financial fair play is starting to come after those clubs. It looks like maybe Man City is going to get hit with a sanction. It looks like maybe Chelsea, after complaining all those years. But it's not just that. Liverpool need a director of football. The format is changing in the Champions League, which basically is leading to more games, and there's just endless sums of money. It just seems like to be unopposed. And again, it felt like last season was maybe the first time where he thought he had met his match. And there's been a lot of talk coming into this season that a lot of the change that Liverpool has made, moving Trent a little bit into midfield, trying this what they call is it's a WM kind of formation, but really it's the three with like the box four in midfield, 2-2, and then three attackers. There's been a lot of rumors that that was really Pep Linder's his assistant's idea, and Klopp's maybe been leaning a little bit more on him. Klopp made some kind of comments in his press game that he went into a summer training session and he didn't know how to speak. He didn't know what to talk about, and he had to let the Linders basically lead the meeting. And going into last season, he did conference after conference or just public speaking after speech or a public appearance, and saying he didn't need necessarily another midfielder to come in. He believed in Thiago and Naby Keita being able to be relied on when everyone else was just screaming, "Go get a midfielder next season, or disaster is going to happen." And he believed Milner and Henderson could be relied on to do what he's asked his midfield to do over the years. And constantly playing Henderson and Milner together in midfield last season conceded goals. It added a lot. They kept losing key midfield battles, and there was a Brighton game and a Wolves game last season around basically this time where it did feel different, and then the Man City game was maybe the real turning point because they weren't even competitive in that game. I think they may even scored the first goal with Jota, and just Henderson was not able to cover runners. They were able to get behind Robinson and Van Dijk, and it just looked. There was also a really bad Champions League game versus Napoli in October, where you saw everything just kind of changing when you don't have a midfield that can put pressure on the ball and you're playing a high line. Just a ball over the top can get behind you, and they didn't have someone like a Kanate healthy last season. I think Van Dijk really enjoys having Kanate back with him as opposed to maybe Matip. or even a Gomez, because Konate is next level when it comes to being able to track runners in behind him. So I think there was a lot of that, and again, just kind of the change last season started with, funny enough, Arsenal. Liverpool were getting absolutely dominated at home at Anfield to Arsenal. It was a 2-0 kind of game, and then something happened. Klopp moved Trent basically to do this kind of inverted midfield situation. He brought on Thiago. He was able to play Thiago that game. I think that's the last time we saw Thiago. And from there, Liverpool were able to just figure it out and were able to go on a run again. And they really have only lost 2 games since that, or 1 game since that, at least in the league, since that day. And so again, it did feel like there was belief again, and there was energy again, and just 'cause going over his legacy, you have to look at him both as a manager and his career, which basically starts with him being a winner, and not just necessarily with trophies, just win at every level, and also being able to build up clubs. Well, he built Dortmund into what he is. You look back, and this stunned me last season. He's the last manager to win a Bundesliga that wasn't a Bayern manager. Uh, that because Bayern have won something like 13 in a row. He's won basically every trophy that you can at Liverpool. I think he's missing the Europa, which I guess he's going to go for this season. And when he joined Liverpool, this was not the club that it was. Now it's always has a history and stature, but the couple years before that, uh, Rodgers and Suarez basically, helped Rodgers to a second. But again, it was Colo Torre, it was Albert Moreno, it was Nathaniel Klein, the midfield of Joe Allen, Lucas Lavia, very young Henderson, Coutinho, and Sterling were, I guess, okay. Uh, yeah, Balotelli, you could never really stay healthy as Sturridge. This was not the team that he he basically uh, when he joined, this was like maybe a top 8 team, a team that was just kinda hoping to get back into a Europa spot, essentially. This was a mid-level club when he joined, and just in a few short years, he was able to completely change how they play. And not only that, he's been able to build them up into something truly special, and I think the couple notes that I have is it starts with his intensity, from training, basically training through games, making games as hard as basically, or making training as hard as games. And there's been uh, a lot of talking and players complaining about that, at least in the beginning. But I think when you describe his style, that really is it. Just the relentless desire to outrun, out physical teams on the ball and to press in a manner to create turnovers, not as like a defensive thing. You actually hear when Lenders and Klopp have spoken. They no the goal really is to create a turnover. It's not good enough to get pressure on the ball, especially, and the reason why I say that is it's also not good enough to uh, when you get close to a defender, you can't foul him, and it's really hard to be able to do that. And you actually hear Klopp whenever there is kind of a foul or giveaway, you see him get mad about that more than anything else. If someone misses a sitter, he's okay with that. He doesn't want if you're in a good pressing situation, maybe you have a team outnumbered 2-1, and there's like a cheap dirty foul. He melts down over that. Uh, but another thing too is so to be able to press this way, the whole team has to be able to understand how to move as one, or you allow gaps. Another thing too is your front line attackers have to be the first line of defense, and there's been a lot of talk about that. But basically, it means you have to be able to do a lot of running without the ball, and not a lot of attackers, especially on really nice wages, like doing that. Uh, so it requires a certain mindset. It requires and that's not easy to necessarily find in recruitment. But I think another thing too is he's shown his ability to adapt with the times. He's gone from maybe being the quickest team in transition, lightning attack, to maybe one that was more measured in past seasons. Bringing Thiago in, everyone didn't know how this was going to work, and he allowed Liverpool to have a little more control and become one of the best teams in Europe in possession. Because for the longest time, it was rock and roll football, and it was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of a lot of running without the ball, and that can take out the legs too. And they found a way to really control games where they can decide what the tempo of a game is in a way that they didn't necessarily have that until they brought Tiago in, and since then they've been able to bring in better recruitment to change in a Henderson or Fabinho, a Milner to better players on the ball. Curtis Jones has grown into that. Harvey Elliott, Gakpo, uh, Alexis McAllister, which we'll get to Dominic Sloboslai. And now, when you move Trent into midfield, it's kind of the same situation, and that is entirely different than where we were. Going from Firmino to Nunez has taken some time to change, and the main thing that's exciting is he's been able to oversee a successful rebuild. I think whoever takes over next season is taking over a club that other than like the Salah situation, because there doesn't really seem to be a like for like out there to replace him. And eventually you're going to miss his legs. Eventually, he is 31, 32. That's not always going to be, and he's always been reliant physically. He picked up that hamstring. Is that's going to be start to be a thing? That's kind of the only maybe negative, as far as there isn't really a place to go as far as a replacement. So whoever you bring in is going to be different. But other than that, he has really built this club into something insane. And another thing, he's really good at motivating his guys to maybe play above themselves, and we've seen it this year. What he's done with this Connor Bradley guy who's just come out of nowhere. He looks like he can just plug and place in Trent's possession. Kwanzaa, likewise. Curtis Jones has completely changed his developed into quite a player. I used to hate him. Well, I shouldn't say hate him. Uh, I used to really, really side eye him. I think he has a chance to get into an England spot for Southgate. The amount of work that he does without the ball, he's one of the best counter pressers in the team. And Harvey Elliott has improved, and Jota didn't look like Sergio Aguero at Wolves. Darwin Núñez has improved his game from this season to last season as well. What he's gotten out of Endo and Joe Gomez and McAllister is playing a completely different position. And so that's something to think about as well. And when I think of Klopp, I think his legacy is turning two fullbacks, one coming from an academy and one being bought from Hull City for 7 million, into being both are league leaders in assists. I think it's like 37 for defenders. And that is what Klopp ball is. It's basically Trent Alexander-Arnold doing a crossfield switch to Andy Robinson, the other fullback on the field, where Robinson maybe leads to a goal scoring chance, or Robbo has a switch to Alexander-Arnold. The way he was able to use fullbacks was just really, really different than really anyone else at the time, and he was able to do that. Basically, he got the width and wings from the fullbacks that allowed Salah and Mane to play a little more narrow and basically become inside forwards. I guess would be the word for it. And they were able to do that because they asked the midfielders, Gini Wijnaldum and Henderson, to basically hold back. And you were basically the defensive-minded fullbacks, and that's how they were able to. There was a lot of positional switching, and that is that. Now you actually see that a lot now. In fact, what's funny enough is as Alexander-Arnold has kind of changed his position, you haven't seen a lot of that bombing down the wing, and you've seen Salah actually be moved out there. Or when Szoboszlai's come in, he's kind of been used to do wing duties. One thing we saw with Connor Bradley versus Chelsea was we saw we saw a return to that kind of style where you have the fullback, and no, his job is to just make runs up and down. You defend on the wing, and you being an attacker through the wing, and it was exciting to be honest. And I think there's easily a situation where I can see Bradley playing it right back, and Trent being available, and maybe playing in midfield instead, or maybe vice versa. Maybe not vice versa, but maybe a situation where Bradley or Trent, starts, and maybe he needs to be subbed out, and Bradley comes in too. I was thinking that was going to be Gomez, but unfortunately for Gomez, who has done a fantastic job at left back in his own right, Bradley looks like he's more built. I guess for that. Uh, and I mean, this is praising a 20-year-old kid, but he's looked unreal. But another thing that needs to be said is it's one thing to be successful. A lot of people can be successful, but it seems like Klopp is really generally loved. And a couple notes I have about that is because he gets players to run through walls for him. And one, they have to respect you to be able to. It's not easy to get guys to train as hard as games. It requires because that requires real sacrifice, commitment. Sometimes you're probably asking players to change their diet habits. You have to get players to buy in. So how you have to be quite good at man management. But what I put down is he's just authentically human. Values, cherishes all life, regardless of status. And again, that can be a bit of a negative in his situation because he does sometimes reward players that runs his socks off. Where someone like a Pep will cut someone off the second he thinks there's been some kind of a downside in their game or some kind of decline. Uh, but so I put down he seems to be a father figure for them, someone that looks out for them, and through like 8 years or however long he's been at Liverpool, there's never really been locker room problems. Players fighting, having scandals, complaining about playing time. So that's been unique, and I think socially he's been just the perfect manager and for that club and city. Bill Shankly's Liverpool, as they like to say. And he's got a quote basically: "No one is great by themselves. At some point, someone relies on the sacrifices of others around them. And football is a bit like life. Working for each other and sharing the rewards." And I think, culturally and socially, he's not afraid to speak his mind when he's seen things that aren't necessarily, right in his mind. He was one of the first managers to speak out about the Super League. When Liverpool were one of the original members, he's been speaking about player welfare and regarding game load and, uh, they saw a couple of times when players have wanted to do some protest. He supported them, and I just think it's been really cool just for me personally to root for a club that I don't really have a ton of connection with or any connection with as a team, and the club and the manager have come to share my personal values. So I think that's been unique, and I think when you think of him, I think he's just a role model to look up to and to live by, and it's really cool how someone has made it that elite level of success is still grounded and still appreciates others around him, including club staff. When he extended his contract a couple of years ago, he very notably did not ask for a salary increase. Himself, he wanted that salary increase to go to his staff team. And there are countless of other examples of him just reaching out to fans, illnesses, or ailments, and just kind of being human and kind to them. I think there was a video that kind of went viral recently about a 12-year-old having a day at Anfield and getting a tour and basically Klopp just straight conversing with them and their parents on a human level. And I just thought it was touching and cool, and it has been. I have used cool a lot, but it has been unique to see someone that successful winning games and also be just that good of a person, and recognizing tiny gestures like that can impact someone's life for the rest of their life, and understanding with great power comes with a platform comes responsibility to do good deeds still. And again, the and another unique thing is even with the team being as successful as they've been, there's still a claim to underdog status, which is kind of unique because of the manner that he's going to get state-owned clubs like Man City, who are under apparently 111 infractions. And I think in a unique way, I think that has been rewarded too. Rival fans, you see rival fans praise Klopp sometimes more than Pep, even though Pep's won more, or like for Sir Alex Ferguson, even a Wenger. And I think that's why they recognize Klopp has done some things. Maybe he's done more, maybe with less in a situation. And I think in many respects, a lot of even Liverpool fans feel like ownership if anyone has let him down. There were a couple trophies that were left on the table by not signing midfielders or center backs in key windows that I think prevented some at least two league titles. And this is 2021 when Van Dijk went out. I think if you get Sven Botman, they maybe they don't have that collapse that they had because they went into Christmas leading the league that year, and then 2022 when they only missed Man City by a point. Maybe if you brought in Fabio Carvalho just in that January, maybe you're able to play him versus Spurs in that game, and as if you don't draw that game, you win the league there too. I mean, it was just simple things like that. You had to go into a Champions League where you didn't have Thiago and Naby Keita wasn't able to go, and Henderson really let you down. Situations a little bit like that. And another thing too is it's been remarkable how he's been able to pick the squad back up after some devastating defeats. You lose the UEFA final to or the Champions League final to Real Madrid in 2018, and what do you do after that? Oh, you go ahead and win it the next year. You lose to Man City by a point. I think it could have been devastating too. And what do? You turn around and win the league title the next season without really bringing anyone new. He hadn't won domestic cup competitions. That was starting to be a bit of a gripe that Liverpool fans had. And so in 2022, what did he do? He won the Carabao and FA Cup in the same year, giving Liverpool fans dreams of a quad. And just and then in the after the and that was the year after when it looks like this was all going to come best because in 2021 they had that collapse, and they were basically only able to get in the Champions League with Alisson scoring at the very end, scoring a goal, one of the more memorable goals uh, in the Klopp era, just to keep them in Champions League. And then they turned around and really had a special season the year prior. And then last season it was a bit of a down year too, and you're wondering, going into this, it was going to be a rebuild, and all they've done is they've just turned around and go again. And the way he's been able to motivate has always been praised, but I think this year I've spoken about it too. He's quietly, regardless of if he's getting better advice or he's just kind of grown as a manager, he's been brilliant tactically this season. Where he has just come in and the changes that he's made in the second half, whether it's been getting players to move a different position or bringing in the right subs, he's been brilliant. And in a way that, and he's been more uh, uh, willing to maybe change a little of his formations, change how they play when certain situations have called on it, and he's gotten the second half decisions right, and that's the reason why they are where they are. They've had a lot of injuries this season, and he's been able to survive that to this point, and again, it's just a special manager, and it's not just a loss for Liverpool; it's a loss for the Premier League, loss for Man City fans. Man City fans probably enjoy that Pep and Klopp rivalry, or maybe they don't. But I have, and now the speculation it just kind of turns to well, one, how can they send him off in a really special way? Uh, but two, who do they look to replace him with? And immediately speculation went to Xabi Alonso, and that's probably who I would prefer. Madrid is going to be looking as well. They don't necessarily. No one knows how long Ancelotti is going to be there. Xabi Alonso played at Bayern Munich, played at Liverpool, and played at Real Madrid, and played under let's see, Mourinho, Benitez, Ancelotti, and Pep. And so he's got quite the resume builder as far as just coaches that he's played under, and the kind of the stuff he did at Real Sociedad B when even before he joined Leverkusen, and he's come into Leverkusen. I think they were in a relegation spot. He turned around and within 1 year or maybe half a season, got that team into I think the UEFA semifinal last season, and he's got Bayern Leverkusen, pushing Bayern Munich for Bundesliga title to be the first one to do it since Klopp. So, and also it's funny enough because Alonso is a name that even when I was starting to follow them, when he moved to Real Madrid in I think 2008 or the 2009 summer, my buddies that were a little bit more, I guess, following soccer at that point than I was, were absolutely devastated. And so I've known about Alonso for a long time because of that. As you like grow into learning a little bit and how fans think, Alonso's name was just always mentioned as, oh, we weren't able to replace him. And there was like that kind of thinking for like 5 years, and then finally Gerard was moved a little bit more into a deeper position where they're like, oh, that's finally the Alonso replacement. But there's always been that kind of mystique a little bit about him, and he fits a little bit if you're going to bring someone in that would immediately get fan buy-in, that would allow fans to be a little bit patient. It probably would be Alonso. Now, the other managers out there, I think Hansi Flick interests me maybe the most out of if they can't get him. So I already worked with Thiago. I What he did with Bayern Munich was amazing. And I don't really count what he did with the German national team. I think international game is harder than necessarily managing a club. You only see your players, what, 10, 12 times a year, and, he had to rely on Havertz for goals, and we've seen a lot of managers kind of struggle with that conundrum, and Havertz and Werner, for goals. So, I don't necessarily know how much I value what he did with Germany. I looked at what he did with Bayern Munich. He went a full calendar year where he won more trophies. I think he won, like, 7, and he only had 6 losses. So, I don't really, and I think the only reason why he left was he just didn't he, got in trouble with the hierarchy at the club, and so the only thing is, maybe he wouldn't work necessarily with FSG. De Zerbi is going to be mentioned. I don't necessarily know if he necessarily fits, culturally, like I was saying. He basically gets in fights with opposing managers like every single game. I'm not gonna say, that I've looked down on him because of what happened this season. I think what he's doing this season is equally as impressive as he did last season because given the losses that he's had, given the players that they lost and not able to replace, I think, it's amazing that they are still somewhat safe and not fighting a relegation battle. At dark horses, I put down Kasper Højlund, the Denmark manager. Thomas Frank, I think, has been mentioned. Sporting's Almiron is interesting too. I think his name's been thrown around. I think Nagelsmann will be mentioned. He's now the German coach as well, but I don't necessarily. I've kind of cooled down on him. He had a weird scandal to end his Bayern career, and I mean, nothing's going to be a grand slam. The Klopp was really unique when he was available because and maybe it'll what allowed them is it seemed they weren't Dortmund were losing players left and right because Bayern kept poaching them, and Dortmund weren't able to necessarily bring in players to necessarily replace them. And his last season just really fell apart. His players had been run to the ground, and they weren't able to compete. But he was a manager that had done some amazing things with that club. He built them up, and he had also gotten to a UEFA Champions League final. It's not You're not going to be able to necessarily find both the player a manager that'll be able to have immediate buy-in with players, and also someone has some kind of a connection to the club. So, or not connection to a club, but has immediate buy-in with fans. So I think the first choice should be Alonso, and whether or not he accepts or not, then you maybe go from there. But the season's not over, and they still have him for a couple more memories, and we'll see what they're able to do. And looking for how we're doing for time, and it's not too bad. It's basically what I normally do. And so speaking with Roberto De Zerbi, I will get started with Luton and Brighton, and Luton go on to win 4-1, starting really early with Adebayo getting a goal in like the first 30 seconds. Then Ogbeni gets one in the third minute, so 2-0, and then 3-0 before even halftime when it looked like Brighton had somewhat managed to get back into the game, at least control wise. And then Adebayo again gets his hat trick. And coming into this, Luton. Uh, the funny thing about like this past week's games is it was all a rematch from the first week, and so Luton played Brighton in week 1, and I remember that game because I watched it live, and Luton played Brighton pretty good. I think Brighton got an early goal, maybe from Pedro, maybe it was a PK, but it was only 1-0 kind of game. I thought Brighton were actually or Luton were doing a pretty good job to make Brighton at least struggle a little bit, and Luton were posing a threat, a counter threat. And then what happened in that game was in the second half, defensively they just completely collapsed. And you can imagine it was the first game in the league and whatnot, but that's also not the same Luton team that that played in this game. And with Brighton, Brighton came into this game struggling. They conceded 2 goals to Sheffield. I think it was 2-2 going into halftime after having a 2-goal lead. And for even before that, they hadn't. I think they went scoreless in the last 2 games prior to this. And I think you just the injuries to or the misses of Matoma and Adengra are starting to show. And defensively, they're not as secure as they were last season. Billy Gilmore and Pascal Gross are good in possession, but not necessarily out of it, and they haven't been able to again replace Casado and Alexis. And Losing Lovey Colwell last season to what they have with Igor Julio, it's not necessarily like for like either. So I think they've missed on that, and that's going to be a bit of a theme with Brighton. It's kind of crazy how they were able to sell Casado to Chelsea for 100 million, and they didn't necessarily invest in that properly. They went back for more kind of project players. Carlos Beba, I think, is 18 years old. They apparently just brought in another 18-year-old from Boca Juniors, who uh, who could be interesting, but at the same time young. They didn't. You didn't necessarily see because they've had so much profit generated by selling players. Mapai is all of a sudden doing stuff, going to get stuff for Brentford. Ben White would be another. It's been player after player that they've been able to just kind of give away, and they haven't been necessarily been able to reinvest in that, unfortunately. So that basically kind of sets us up a little bit. And I think with Luton played different with home. I think we've necessarily seen that. I think they also played different when Morris and Adebayo play at the same time, and it was a very aggressive lineup that we saw with Luton Town. And Ogbeni is a world class sprinter that we've seen. He's able to get in behind, and really the change has been Lokonga and Barkley played together. That's completely changed them. I don't think Barkley was able to play in the beginning, or maybe they signed him late, and it's taken a while for Lokonga just to get into the side. But I mean, Lokonga has a ball that basically sets up the second goal. And another thing that you can say with Luton Town is just physically they are a handful, to say the least. Uh, Because one thing I was one of the few that was really doubting them, but I was also going off on what they looked like in the beginning of the season. And one thing I should have recognized earlier that I missed is when you look at them, their ability to just straight make games chaotic in the opponent's penalty area is something. I mean, basketball like it. Luton are really long and leggy, and Brighton were just struggling all game with their legs being able to outstretch them. And a good mix of good delivery and people being good in the air is a threatening combo, and that's what you see for the first goal. I mean, really early on, Brunette has a poor touch, and that's picked off by Berkey, the center back stepping in. So you already see them being brave. You have the center back playing in a high line, and then they play some good stuff. They win the ball. Cara Morris has wins the loose ball and has a toe poke to Adebayo, and then Adebayo is then able to play it out wide to Akbeni, right side of the penalty area. No one on Brighton is able to get touched tight to him, and he sends in a ball, and basically, I think it's Carlton Morris. He outjumps Milner or Pascal Gross and dunks on him, and there gets the ball to Adebayo in the basically 5 yards or 5 feet from goal, and Adebayo is able to beat Jason Still to head it past him. And another thing too is Adebayo plays a role in the beginning when he receives it from Carlton Morris. He sets up Ugbeni, so he has some pretty good hold up play with the ball. He's able to draw attention on himself and allow numbers to get into the box. And I, this game is a lot more simple than maybe it's talked about. You can have a lot of tactics and pressing zones and all this lingo. Really, if you can get your player people to beat someone in a 1v1 matchup, good things will follow, essentially, because it is a cascading effect from that. And so, Carlton Morris versus a Milner or Pascal Gross, whoever it was, that's a mismatch in the air, and Luton were able to exploit that. Uh, Another thing too is Luton are unique for a promoted side to have legs and athletes to play okay without the ball. They can press and cause turnovers and really break up field with pace. And what was happening in the beginning of the season is they were showing that they were pretty good at doing that as well, but they also had like 100 and some passes. They were not necessarily as good with the they were a little careless with the ball. And one thing that's changed is that's where someone like Ross Barkley and Lokonga have come in and completely changed them a little bit. Also, Carlton Morris seems to be way better with some help, and it's taken a while for Adebayo just to actually get into the side as well. And what's happened is Adebayo in some of these games has actually replaced Carlton Morris. I remember the that Man United game when London actually looked pretty good. I think Man United only won 1-0. Carlton Morris was quite dreadful on the ball, and he was just kind of playing by himself. And Adebayo, for the most part, was stuck to second hand duty because he had a really bad miss, I think, for Spurs earlier in the season when they were actually playing up a man. Spurs were able to beat them playing down a man, and I think that was the first time when I was like, London are probably going to be the first team to go down. You can't because Spurs dominated that game down a man, and but they've been able to change around, change a lot of things around, and uh, I don't necessarily know if there's some kind of a emotional element tied to this because ever since they've lost their captain Tom Lockyer to that cardiac arrest situation, they've really gone out and just woken up and played some really good football. But not just that, they've gotten really good results. And it started with beating Newcastle earlier. I think immediately following. And so we get to the second goal, and the second goal is dreadful by Brighton, but it's a good goal by Luton, and I don't think it's one they would have been able to create earlier in the season. And they're knocking it around with the back line. Lokonga gets on the ball. He sees Ugo, Julio, and Esteban switched off, and he picks out Obini, making a run in behind, and Obini basically 1v1 with Jason Still and is able to make it 2-2. Brighton did have a couple looks, a couple of chances for Welbeck that. Yeah, maybe a better striker is able to put them at least on target. They weren't necessarily even able to make a save. There was one cross that basically just barely missed the outstretch of his foot. So I can't necessarily go with him for that. And then one of the shots was from a tight angle, but it seemed right when it looked like Brighton had basically calmed things down. Luton were able to get the third, and here Luton are pressing Brighton like crazy here. And I think it's a mistouch by Stupien. He allows Barkley to win the ball back, and then Luton basically have four players in front of the ball. Barkley plays Adebayo into the box, and then he beats Jason Steele at his near post. And it really wasn't Jason Steele's best game, but at the same time, he didn't have a lot of defensive support. Stupien is out of the picture too. He's the one that loses the ball, and he's too high upfield. There's no midfield stopper either to protect the back line, and Hugo Yulia just lets Adebayo just run behind him with no resistance. And the goal, it's relentless pressure from Luton. Something Brighton usually punish teams on, but at the same time, there are different players out there for De Zerbi now, and they don't have necessarily the quality to. They don't have the ability to necessarily scare a back line with maybe a long ball to Matoma to make them push back a little bit. They didn't have that with Pedro and I think it was Facundo Bernete on the other side, and it's a different Brighton now, unfortunately for them. And someone like a Billy Gilmore is really good on the ball, but he needs options, and it's cluttered. It's cluttered for Stupien too, and but another thing too is once Luton win the ball back, you still need to have some quality. It's not job done there, and it's a really good slip pass that Ross Barkley plays to fools Ugo Julio, and Ross Barkley is probably not going to get shots for England, but it's hard to not argue a case that as far as an English minded midfielder, he's certainly worth conversation given the way that he because he's doing some really really good things in the middle of the park. Defensively, he's stepped up his game too. I didn't really realize he could play this kind of a holding, creative midfield possession in the center of the pitch, and it works out that you have Lokonga, who's kind of a ball winner, next to him. But Barkley has been sensational, and a lot of Luton's turnaround in form has been when Barkley was able to actually get into the side. I don't think that's been a coincidence. And then they get the fourth for the hat trick for Adebayo. It's it's just kind of a corner kick, and I think it's Yao Pedro. He's just really unlucky, and the ball just falls basically to Adebayo's head. It's a few feet from goal. And he's able to knot it in. The only reason to talk about this is it's just really cool for him. Like I mentioned, he had that bad miss for Spurs, and looked like maybe this was a little bit too much for him, and he's just stuck with it. And he's rewarded a manager for sticking with him too. And I think it goes back to that there was like a Chelsea game that Luton were losing like 3-0, and then they came back and made it 3-2 and actually gave Chelsea a scare in the final like 5 minutes or so. And what you saw Morris and Adebayo play together and basically just both are physical beasts. Both are really good in the air, and just that kind of chaos. And they're really good. They're one of the best teams actually when it comes to open play delivery. So they send a lot of crosses in, but they're accurate crosses, and that combination is just hell. It's hell for anyone to defend with, and so credit to the manager too for basically noticing that and being brave to it's not easy to play with sometimes two attackers. Sometimes that can especially with Brighton. You figure Brighton maybe can outpress you or can play through your press, and then you're maybe a man short elsewhere on the field. And no, the opposite happened. This wasn't a fluke. 18 they outshot Brighton basically 2-1. 8 shots on goal versus two on Brighton. The xG was 3.2 to Brighton's point 0.9. Brighton did create and miss 4 chances, but and the possession wasn't as bad as you would expect. It's 40% to 60, and Luton 253 is it doesn't look great, but I remember when they were in 119 numbers not that long ago. So this was quietly one of the more exciting stories in the league, just given how they looked absolutely dead to rights, and they've basically played themselves out of safety now. And the only thing here is a lot of teams have gone on a bit of a purple patch. Nottingham Forest did after they brought in Nuno Espirito Santo. Everton did with Sean Dyche, but how the question is how who out of those three can be able to you make this not just a purple patch, make it actually a little consistent. When you look at Barkley has the quality that he has. They have a really good keeper as well in Kaminsky. It wasn't necessarily shown in this game, but he's saved them in a lot of games as well. And you've got two strikers that can looks like that you can rely on them at least for creating chaos and chances. Where I don't think you can look at Everton like that. Nottingham Forest getting Tyra Awani maybe actually does kind of change things a little bit, but letting them have a chance to really do something here. And I was completely wrong about them. I pegged them as basically I did a podcast with Jeremy. And I thought they were worst in the entire league, but they've turned around and they've especially at that place at their ground. They gave Liverpool a hell of a game, gave Arsenal a hell of a game. Man City it wasn't easy for them either, and Chelsea. So they're able to play top teams a game, and then so it basically shows that they're good enough at least, and then to stay up. And then another thing too is they've started to win the games that they need. They had, or at least they were unlucky maybe not to beat Burnley. Uh, they beating Brighton is positive too. They've beaten Newcastle, and so and they beat I think Crystal Palace earlier in the season. That might have even been their first win. And here you have Adebayo getting a hat trick, and so can that really get him going? And and then because two goal scorers that can cause some hell in the penalty area will always give them a shot. And then with Brighton, you see given what they're missing, I think this is maybe an acceptable result. But again, the everyone was praising them for their brilliant recruitment strategy, and you look at what they did in the summertime. It's weird. Mahoud Dahoud on a free, he hasn't really worked out. James Milner, yeah, I don't think he's worked out either. Carlos Beba is young. Ugo Julio, Verbreggen as a goalkeeper to maybe replace Jason Steele. Verbreggen has had a lot of errors. Jason Steele had a bad game here, but Jason Steele's maybe better on the ball. So, and Brunette has been kind of too. So that is, and I think another thing too is Brighton went into this game playing with three center backs, and you don't. De Serbi's been quite public saying he doesn't like doing that. And so you just he went into this game trying to be a little different, and it kind of backfired as well. And so yeah, Brighton are in a bit of a stretch, but still time to get you get Matoma back soon, you get a Dinger back, it'll look a different Brighton, and maybe and stop playing. El Pedro has actually done well playing on the wing, but he'll benefit by being able to play a little differently as well. And then I'll move on to Crystal Palace and Sheffield. And this is another game that I wasn't really expecting to lead off with. See how we're doing for time. Oh, that's actually really good. And it gets started with Ben Bretton Diaz, and then let's see, and then it was basically the Olise and Eze show. I think it's Eze with a brilliant goal to make it 1-1, and then James McAtee has a really nice finish in his own right to make it to 2-1. And Crystal Palace had to come from behind twice this game, so that shows some mettle to them too. This was a bit of a disaster result, honestly, for Sheffield. This was a chance for them to maybe play themselves out, and instead maybe kind of buried their graves a little bit. Uh, but they just couldn't stop. They couldn't stop Eze and Elise. Eze gets two, and Elise basically one tops everyone with the goal that he scores to basically get the game winner, and that really is a story. Elise and Eze are back, can maybe save Hodgson. The problem for Crystal Palace is simply that they haven't had those two to play at the same time for more than a couple of games. I think it's maybe three or four total. Those two just because we saw what they did with Brentford, and they basically did the same thing to Sheffield, and it was just a two-man team that just ran roughshod over them. With some of the finishes in this game were just unreal, and it's not really a lot that Sheffield could really do about it, and it's just really unlucky that they had to come in and play Palace when Palace were somewhat healthy again. Had this been a couple of weeks ago, Sheffield probably would have gotten the 3 points. And for Sheffield, I think they're starting to find some groove, but is it maybe too little, too late? They're looking better under the new manager, but at the same time, yeah, because they showed some pretty good fight versus Chris Wilder. They showed some pretty good fight in the FA Cup game. They were down to 2 goals, and then they were able to draw it at halftime, and then they did concede, I think, three in the second half. So it was 5-2, but they were able to come from behind, and then this Ben Brenton Diaz has come in and looked a real shrewd buy, to be honest. I think the only maybe negative is Chris Wilder took him off at halftime, and I think it was maybe defensive. He was very I think they changed his formation to go to a back five to basically try to stop Olise and Eze kind of just running over them, and it didn't really work. They Palace was still able to score with Olise and basically able to win the game. And I think the other thing too is late in the second half when Eze and Olise had to come off, that's when Sheffield actually started to enjoy themselves again. And if not for, I think there was a really good save made by Henderson late. I think even someone on Sheffield hit the crossbar on a post. This game easily could have ended 3-3, but you just see what a difference Palace looked like when they had their players. Jordan Ayew was back from AFCON Nations as well, and when you can allow Mateta to just be kind of a hold-up player. I mean, Mateta's so big and strong. He can hold on to the ball and basically allow everyone else to kind of come up into play when you're not necessarily asking him to score goals and ask him to do other things. This Palace team looks you see that they can probably stay up quite easily, and so it really is a case of staying healthy for them, and maybe not necessarily moving off from Roy Hodgson, at least now. Maybe do it in the summertime. But this game was wild. Yeah, like I said, yeah, got started with Brenton Diaz, and again, unfortunately for them, they didn't start the season with this guy. All he's done is because he scored maybe he scored in his debut versus West Ham. He scored, I think, for Brighton as well, and he scores just a minute here, and it's a great finish. Palace were able to, Sheffield are able to get Palace to, get from one side of the field and able to, open up the lane on the other side, and it's a quick switch, and Diaz is basically wide open on the wing, and he's just able to dribble all the way up to the penalty area and just passes it into the net. And then just the goals just only got better from there. As a with the first one for Palace, and a great way to respond. Again, Mateta does really well to hold up the ball, and he allows Palace to get upfield. And then the ball goes out to Elise, and it has a perfect delivery into the box. And Eza just jumps up and just flicks out his foot to basically tap this in, and it's great timing. This is a really good goal by Eze, and it was only going to get better from there. And then the McAtee goal is pretty good on his own right. Again, McBurnley has some pretty good clever feet to evade a defender running with the ball, and then he plays it to McAtee, and he basically I think his shot deflects off Mark Gahey, but he's able to get a deflected shot to fly over the keeper. I mean, you still need to do the shot, so it's still a good goal by McAtee. I was impressed by Ali McBurnley. He had the nice little flick for the first goal, and had a role in this game as well, and he doesn't always start for them. And then, unfortunately for Palace, is they were up against just two potential superstars in Eze and Elise, and this goal was outstanding. I mean, he just kind of gets the ball from Elise, top of the box, and in the beginning, it's not that threatening. Even he's under pressure too. Someone is running at him, and he's able to evade the defender. He shifts it onto his left foot, and basically tells Grabenbach to pick it out of his net. They started this game without Fottingham, and then he got hurt, and Fottingham had to come on. Uh, I mean, a joke I made with my text group is Palace are basically Eze and Elise and like 9 people they picked from the stands. And that's downplaying a little bit what Jefferson Lerma and Will Hughes can offer. Mark Gahey as well. Chris Richards has been pretty good for them, but you just see how much different they look like because Palace, Arsenal made Palace look like a champion side just a week ago. Now Arsenal are a good team, but that was more the case of just Palace not looking like this and not having their players back. They look a much better team now, and again, it's just really poor mistiming for Sheffield because they had a chance to maybe catch them close in the table. I think they would have only been 3 points had they been able to win this, and then it was 2-2 at halftime, and that's when Wilder kind of went a little bit more defensive. And unfortunately for them, a player that's been pretty good for them has a misplayed pass. It's Vinny Souza kind of trying to thread in McTominay. Maybe he looks like Sheffield are going to have a bit of a counter, and instead he misplays a pass, and it allows Palace to actually counter. And Elise starts the counter and plays it to Mateta, and Mateta again does well to link up and hold on to the ball. He advances it upfield, and then Mateta is able to pass it back to Elise, top of the box, and he just running to the top of the box, and he runs up everyone. I think he volleys it with his left foot, and Fotheringham, who's since come in, has no chance. And I mean, it was quite competitive. 12 shots and 4 on target to Sheffield's 9 and 5. Palace just 1.5 or 1.1 xG, and they scored 3 goals. Sheffield with 0.75. I mean, the finishing was unreal in this game for both teams. But this was a tailing stat too. It was 11 versus 1 in Crystal Palace's favor for corner kicks. So that just kind of showed you a little bit where the game really was. Palace with a little bit more possession, about the same for passes for both teams. Sheffield with 320, but 75%. That's a better passing number for Sheffield. And again, once the game changed when Eze and Elise had to go off. I think both were just maybe on a minutes restriction. It wasn't even a given that Elise was going to play this game, and Eze apparently got a little bit of a knock late in this game as well. But apparently, it's not too much for them, and yeah, it's just really unlucky for. It's really good timing for Palace and terrible for Sheffield because without exaggerating. Elise and Eze are some of the more skilled offensive players in the league. They can pass. They have really good vision, touch, finishing. That you saw crossing here. Elise hasn't always been the best finisher, but I think he ended the season last year with the most crosses from maybe March all the way to the end of the season. He finished with like double digit assists when he was brought back into the because that was another thing too. Vieira for some reason wasn't playing Elise and Eze together. There was Zaha was at the club last season too. Maybe there was some of that as well. Maybe there was thinking that you couldn't play both together. Maybe it left you vulnerable or something. But they definitely feed off each other. They like looking for each other. And SA is you could see both being on like Man City. They're that good or like a Man United anywhere. Of Spurs. You could just see them fitting in a lot of places because of they make stuff happen in the final third. Very, very, very good players, and I like with Mateta being around them, it makes his job a lot easier too. So again, this was big for Hodgson, and I think good. I don't think he deserved to necessarily because there was talks maybe Graham Potter was going to come in and kind of make it a little bit embarrassing. I think maybe he wants to do a little bit with Klopp. He wants to go out on a high than necessarily a low, and that definitely would have been a bit of a low moment. He maybe could have gone out last season because what he did to actually help Palace stay up just last season. It was surprised they brought him back, but uh, I think Palace will be okay just as long as they can stay okay. Uh, and then with Sheffield again, it's kind of it was a blown chance, but I don't know. Beaten by two guys that had scored just 3 unreal goals. So it is what it is. Ben Brenton Diaz coming in has been a positive signing. The only thing that to say about that is it was weird to see him come off right at the end of the first half. I don't necessarily know if it was an injury concern, or it shouldn't be necessarily a minutes thing, because he was brought off for his first Brighton in the FA Cup game, and I was wondering, well, maybe he's prioritizing the Palace game for his minutes, and no, he just took him off. So that was a bit of a puzzling thing. But and it really, it's unfortunate they didn't necessarily have him to start the season, because he's come in and immediately made them better. So because he has those good runs in behind, but he's already leading to goals as well. And then I'll move on to Aston Villa and Newcastle, where Fabian Schär gets us started with 2 goals, both coming from corner kicks, bit of a different fashion. And then Jacob Murphy makes it 3-0, and then Ollie Watkins makes it 3-1. Could have been a chance for Villa to actually make it a little more interesting in that second half, because I think Watkins maybe scored a second one, but it was called offsides. But this is more a case of just one, Villa starting maybe be a victim of a little bit of their own success, but also they're still missing some guys. Pau Torres has started to. I think he hasn't played since that Arsenal game, and you're starting to see maybe how big of a miss he is. Lucas Digna and Moreno has been a little bit different. Matty Cash has started to actually get more game time, and unfortunately, he has a couple misplayed passes, or he loses the ball, and that's actually where Newcastle were able to counter. Uh, and another thing too is Liam Bailey wasn't able to necessarily start this game, and once he came on, actually that's when Aston Villa like immediately scored. Uh, there was also Diego Carlos. Diego Carlos was at least on the bench option, but you're saying that Unai Emery struggled a little bit. And then another thing too is, if Watkins can't net for them, you do kind of worry a little bit. John Duran apparently has some injury issues now as well, and they're still alive in Europa. And it was surprising they weren't able to necessarily do some business in the transfer window. And with Newcastle didn't only need this. Newcastle look a little different. It was the second half versus Fulham in the FA Cup game, where I think it was the first time really since maybe October where Newcastle looked the team that had more energy, that were able to outrun the other team. And you saw that in this game too. Newcastle were actually the team that was outrunning Aston Villa to any kind of loose ball, and they're starting to get their legs back again. And I think it helps that they're only going to have once a week football now, and they don't have many games on the schedule for February. They're not going to have many games in March either. They're going to be able to recoup a little bit, and a lot of this has come with not just getting a couple guys back from injury, getting the main back line back. Fabian Schär with Botman. Botman missed pretty much the entire first half of the season, and ever since the last few games, Newcastle have looked Newcastle again, and I think there's some of that as well. And another thing too is, because both these goals came from corner kicks, but the reason the corner kicks came was because there are a couple times when Newcastle were able to win the ball back, and they immediately saw, hey, Aston Villa can actually getting behind. Aston Villa play that famed high line. Most teams usually struggle with it, but Bruno Guimaraes is really good on the ball, and he was able to play Anthony Gordon or Ishak, making some runs in behind, and that's basically where a couple of the corner kicks come from, and then they score on the corner kicks. But Newcastle have found a way to. Newcastle enjoy playing Aston Villa, apparently. Because it was the first game of the season where they thumped them, I think 5-1, and that was a game when Tyron Mings kind of got injured early on, and you kind of put it up to a little bit of that. Maybe just Newcastle know how to play beat Aston Villa's high line. You have someone like an Ishak or Gordon, or in the second half it was Almiron. Just everyone with that pace to get in behind, and because Aston Villa play risky like that, and they were able to make it count. And another thing too is they were able to press and able to really annoy Villa in a way that they just haven't in the past. They finally had their legs again, and going forward, that's going to be good for them. I don't necessarily know if they can make up enough points to finish in Europa spot, or maybe make a late top 4 charge. I don't. I think they're like, I don't know, 8th or 7th in the table still. But one thing you can say is they're still alive in the FA Cup. Maybe they can still make a run there. And they don't necessarily have everyone back. Callum Wilson's not necessarily back. Ishak had to go off here. I don't necessarily know if that was for an injury. They might get Nick Pope back a month earlier than they thought, so maybe back sometime in March. that could make them come back on a run as well. Uh, they've lost Joe Linton, but the way they're able to, they've grown a homegrown monster in Lewis Miley. This season has been basically the season for youngsters in a way that I can't really remember, and a lot of that has been due down to injuries. KB Mano would be another for Man United. Liverpool is starting to have some success with Connor Bradley. And Newcastle will have some of that with Lewis Miley. They're enjoying a little bit of that as well. And so that's kind of getting us started. I don't necessarily want to spend a ton of time necessarily talking about where the goals happened or how they happened. I basically kind of covered that a little bit. I mean, Aston Villa with 12 shots and 6 on target. Newcastle 14 and 5, but three big chances for Villa and 5 for Newcastle. There were a couple times when actually I thought Ollie Watkins did pretty well to play in Diaby, and Diaby just was hesitant to shoot. That was kind of annoying. Uh, Another thing I was noticing was when Tielemans is played, what one thing that they kind of try to do is they try to play him because he starts as kind of an attacking minded player, but he's not, or on the wing. But what he's really doing is he's trying to be an extra midfielder, and that's supposed to allow some space for either Moreno or when Digna plays Digna to basically be like the attacking minded winger in that situation. But and it was causing some problems a little bit for Newcastle in the beginning. There were a couple really good through balls that he played in. Watkins, I think it's just positive that he's able to get back on the scoring sheet. He'd gone a couple of games kind of being scoreless. He scored a good goal, and the goal was created by Leon Bailey coming in. So that was different. And another thing I want to say is in the second half when Alexander Isak had to go off. Eddie Howe did something different. He brought in Anthony Gordon or he moved Anthony Gordon to play centrally. And what he did is he brought on Miguel Almiron to play on the left wing. And it was probably just kind of a situation that they were forced to do because you have Jacob Murphy and you know Callum Hudson-Odoi was available. And to be honest, it worked. Almiron has the run on the left channel that hilariously leads to the third goal, and Murphy looks good. Murphy had some pretty good legs. He has a couple 1-2s that I think leads to one of the corner kicks in the second half. There was a nice little 1-2 with Longstaff, and that's kind of a thing too. When I talk about Newcastle were able to outrun Villa, there's a situation where just a couple give and goes, and all of a sudden Newcastle were in behind Villa, and that was happening over and over again. And just it seemed that Aston Villa was suffocated with Newcastle's pressure. And again, we hadn't necessarily seen that in a while. So I think that's kind of the way to start off. So good adjustments, I think, by Eddie Howe. And then because like I said, bringing on Almiron basically does create the third goal that kind of killed the game off. But they have their legs again, and they also have Sven Botman back. And Fabian Schär maybe has his best game of the season with Botman back because he also, I think Fabian Schär had a clearance, there was a chance when Leon Bailey or Moussa Diaby looked like he was maybe past the keeper and had an open goal, and he kind of flubs the shot, but still it requires Fabian Schär to run back and clear it off the line. So that was a big moment too in the game because that happened early in the second half as well. So Fabian Schär had his best game, not just the 2 goals. He was good defensively as well. And Botman had a really good game versus Fulham, and Botman starting to get his energy back as well. And yeah, good week for Fulham. I mean, good week for Newcastle. Beat Fulham in the FA Cup and able to do this. And they only like playing Aston Villa, as I mentioned what they did in the first half of the season. And I think with Aston Villa, Emery's trying to play the same way, and he's not noticing that with other players, he can't really do it. You don't have Paul Torres or Diego Carlos back there. You have Clement Langley back there, and it's not the same thing. Alex Mourinho has come in and done somewhat of a decent job, but he's not necessarily Luca Digna, and that's maybe kind of gonna hurt them a little bit. Matty Cash was trying to do a little too much in this game, and when he was losing the ball, that was actually allowing. Uh, Newcastle to counter basically directly on that side with Anthony Gordon or Ishak. Like they were targeting Matty Cash when he was going out of position. So it's not all negatives. Leon Bailey back was able to help them out. Watkins back to scoring again, and it's just not the best January for Unai Emery's Villa. And Tottenham have already caught them in the table, and maybe Newcastle are going to try to chase them. And it's not necessarily the end of the world. They're still alive in Europa as well, but this was maybe a chance. I was a little bit surprised they didn't do a little more in the transfer market. Now, a lot of teams are apparently trying to keep their powder dry because it looks like financial fair play is starting to become a thing for all these clubs. And Villa did have a pretty big spending session a couple of years ago. So maybe they're just waiting for the for summer to come and to have a new calendar year on the books. But this was maybe a chance to add to the team just a little bit to help them kind of suffer through some of these lull periods, and they weren't able to do it. So it is what it is. And then moving on to Nottingham Forest and Arsenal. And Arsenal do go on to avenge Nottingham Forest, beating them 2-1. This was the ground that basically they lost the title last season. The title was kind of foregone at that point, but it was really them losing to Forest that allowed City to win it officially. But this game, it took some growing pains. It took a while for them to get the first goal. Gabriel Jesus basically gets it in the 55th minute, and it comes from a Matt Turner error, just hard. I'll have to spend a little time on that, unfortunately. Turner, I think maybe lost his job because I think Forrest even brought in a keeper yesterday at the last second. And then Saka came in, and it was another Forrest mistake. I think it's Montiel is trying to maybe clear the ball, and there's low pressure by Martinelli, so good by Martinelli. But he just hits it basically right to Odegaard. Odegaard has really good touch. It's worth kind of praising that. And then Odegaard's able to get the ball out of his feet to Jesus, and then Jesus has the square ball to Saka, and then Saka does actually pretty well here. Saka has a chance to cut it onto his left foot like he likes doing, but I think if he does that, Gibbs White or whoever is run back, I think is going to be able to block it. And so what he does is he actually trusts his weaker right foot, and he's able to pass it into the corner, and it's a good goal. And at that point, you did think it was maybe over. Taiwo Awani was able to return. He's been missed for Nottingham Forest severely, and he offered something that Chris Wood wasn't necessarily doing. He offered a real counter threat, and basically he came in and someone like Saliba did not enjoy necessarily playing with him. They were able to make it 2-1 late in the game. I think it comes in like the 88th minute where I think it's Anthony Alenga here who had just come on. He has like a header into the penalty area, and Awani is just able to body off Saliba, and there's a little chaos in the box, and he's able to finish. And then right at the very end of the game, I think Forest have a corner kick, and Tawani almost won or got a second goal to make it a draw. It actually required a pretty good save by Raya. And again, with Forest, the positive here is they were awful, absolutely dreadful in the first half, but they were pretty good at somewhat making things difficult for Arsenal. But in the second half, when they brought on Tawa Ani and they brought in Anthony Alenga, you saw them tick a little bit better. And it's interesting too that they've since brought in Gia Reyna, and I know that there was a rumor about that last week that I mentioned. It's now official, so we're going to see Gia Reyna in the EPL, and Morgan Gibbs White plays as a 10, but he's also played further ahead when Cooper was still managing them. And Morgan Gibbs White was one of the three attackers. He's got a little more pace to his game. Jay Reyna like kind of like stays a little further back. He likes he likes being a little more of a playmaker kind of player. And with Alenga on one side, you maybe Gibbs White on the right, Awani in ahead, and maybe you have maybe a Jay Reyna as a 10 player, or maybe you have Gio Reyna and Mangala in kind of a pivot. This could be really exciting too. So hopefully he'll get to have some game time because he hasn't really had a lot of game time at Dortmund, and I don't really understand it because when he's come on, I thought he's looked pretty good for them. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how that works. And interesting that Nottingham Forest have been able to bring in Gio Reyna and also bring in a keeper last minute when they're supposed to be under financial fair play, and all these other clubs are really struggling with that. So I don't know what Forest's books are, but that was a bit surprising too because it's possible they have sanctions coming their way, and if that happens, Forest are going to be in some trouble because they're just out of it now. They've had a good run with bringing in uh, Nuno Espirito Santo, but at the same time they're only a few points out of this, and Luton are coming at their heels, and Everton are close as well. But Everton also have points deductions possibly coming their way as well. And the thing I want to really touch on with this game is how it started, uh, it seemed like pretty much what I was watching is anytime something was happening in that first half, it was Zinchenko. It was Zinchenko being on the ball and basically, creating things. Declan Rice wasn't really doing that. I thought Odegaard was trying to look for the ball too, and Forest had a really good setup where it was Gibbs White, Danilo, and Mangala, and they were just denying that space in the middle. And it was hard for Arsenal to pass it through there. So the outlets really were out wide, but when the ball was going out wide, Martinelli didn't really was kind of isolated, and Saka as well. Uh, the interesting thing for Arsenal is Smith Rowe started this game, and he got started in actually that famed LCM, Granit Xhaka kind of role, and he did some good things. He actually had I think he had maybe a shot that like deflected out of bounds, and he had a cross that nearly actually led to an own goal. But at the same time, I didn't think he did enough, and I think the thing that I was a little disappointed with was he didn't do enough running without the ball. He was kind of just he was waiting for it, and he was and I think he could have offered Martinelli maybe an overlap help, to maybe do something there. I didn't just think he was doing enough running without the ball or trying to look for it. He was waiting for the ball to come to his feet, and he's gonna have to change there. Uh, Declan Rice at the same time was also kind of he wasn't able to really thread in between the lines. He had good passing numbers, uh, but it was very safe. I thought side to side, it is what he is. I mean he's brought in to stop basically teams being able to counter on them. But when Arsenal don't have the first goal and the games are tight, especially in Nottingham, were set up to really make this hard. They were playing Nico Williams basically as the winger, and Nico Williams is a fullback. So they were doubling up on Martinelli, and it was not easy. No, Nottingham Forest were basically pinned in the entire first half, but it was not necessarily easy for Arsenal to create a ton of looks themselves. Another problem too is I think I mentioned it before. Teams recognize don't let Martinelli or Saka beat you 1v1 and basically be their goals threats. Make those players creative. Make those players when they get the ball out wide have to look for someone to cross in. And they don't like doing it. Jesus isn't really a threat in the air that much. Declan Rice isn't making a run into the box because again that defeats the purpose of him being the stopper. And I think teams are really enjoying that. Maybe that probably is the reason why Arteta brought in someone like a Havertz. Is that was supposed to be the role that Havertz was supposed to make. Is he makes those runs from midfield and he's 6'2" and he's good in the air, and he just hasn't worked out where he's not good defensively. But that was noticeable to me in this game too, and that was kind of an unfortunate thing. Uh, I mean, Jesus does get the important goal, so I guess I will touch a little bit on the goal. I mean, at halftime, I was also wondering this is probably the game for Nketiah to come in. Arsenal had so much of this ball in the Nottingham Forest penalty area and weren't really able to really do much. I was also wondering maybe Havertz could come in. And Forest were doing a really good job to be dogged. There were a couple times when Arsenal were able to create some danger moments, but a couple really well timed blocks and challenges were able to stop it. And the game changed in two ways. Nottingham Forest brought on Tyra Awani instead of Chris Wood. Took him off, and all of a sudden Forest were able to actually get a couple counters, and maybe I think they got their first corner kick doing that. And then, the other thing that happened too is, at least in the second half, I saw Arsenal, change and be way more, I guess, fluid in the front line. And so, in the second half, you saw Martinelli maybe playing in the middle, Jesus out wide, Saka, likewise, or Saka maybe play on the left. And you saw them, changing it up a little bit. And I don't necessarily know if they just saw that they could do this versus Nottingham Forest, maybe something that they've worked on with Arteta. But I thought that was interesting too. And you actually see it you actually see it for the second goal. Jesus is actually on the left side. You saw Jesus, running to the left. Uh, but yeah, here there's a pretty good Arsenal chance. I think Saka forces a decent Matt Turner save. So Odegaard finds Saka, and then Saka has a good shot. But again, Saka has to do kind of all this by himself. When he gets the ball, Jesus has helped with the build-up, but he's out of the play after that. There's no real threat in the air. And then there was a chance where Jesus struck the post. This was maybe the best they looked as far as attacking movement. So really good quick passing and movement between Saka, Odegaard, and Jesus. I think it is a Saka back heel, Odegaard reverse pass into Jesus, and its best attacking move that I thought they had produced up to this point. And Jesus is unlucky. I don't not necessarily going to go at him a little bit here. It's a tight angle too. It's not this is not necessarily an easy chance, but I just want to highlight a little bit what Saka, Jesus, and Odegaard were able to create in the moment because for the most part, Odegaard had struggled to just get the ball in a threatening area, and he was good here. Uh, and then basically, let's see. In the 67th minute or 65th minute, Mangala and Danilo had done a pretty good job at this point of really making Odegaard and Smith Rowe and kind of Rice really quiet in that second half build-up. And Arsenal again were having to advance the ball out on the wings instead. And what happened is uh, Mangala had to Nuno Espirito took Mangala off to bring on Ryan Yates, and that's basically kind of a defensive holder type to be a little more maybe attack minded, and that maybe kind of backfired a little bit too. But the first goal comes from just a complete mistake by Matt Turner, and it's a mistake really by Nico Williams too. So what happens is Arsenal get a quick throw in. Nico Williams has the ball. And he basically loses it to Zinchenko, and he falls down trying to buy a cheap foul. It's not given. Is Zinchenko has the ball on a corner kick or on a throw in, and he sees no one is marking Jesus in the box, and it's just a free throw in into the box, and just far so late to react. And then at the same time, Jesus should not be able to score from this tight an angle, and he's able to get it underneath Turner's legs, and he's beaten from a really horrible angle. And it's not the first time that Turner's made a pretty bad mistake. He had a mistake, I think, versus Manchester United recently, and they did sign a keeper on deadline day, and that's probably his farthest career, at least as far as starting for them. And it really is devastating because he had a couple good saves here, but he's made too many mistakes after mistakes. And I think they even said Nuno Santo is a keeper himself, so he didn't enjoy that kind of mistake. And then they score the second goal by mistake as well by Martinelli having the bad pass that led to an immediate turnover. I mean, Arsenal did have 19 shots, but only 3 on target. I watched the game live. I didn't really count 19 shots to be or not necessarily 19 like threatening opportunities. I guess I can say 10 corner kicks versus 1. That was kind of a telling sign too. I mean, the entire it's what Arsenal is. Arsenal always kind of dominate possession, but are they really threatening with it in a way that makes teams? It's not wave after wave of pressure. Liverpool will have a lot of the ball, or like Man City, and it'll be like wave after wave, like a washing machine, kind of like cycling with clothes where there'll be an attack, recycle, and then attack. Arsenal aren't really able to do that necessarily as much. They were last season, and we don't necessarily have to do a lot of that again. I mean, 676 passes completed with 89% accuracy. Forest were allowing Arsenal to have the ball basically camped out around their box. So there's some of that too. I mean, the notes I had for Arsenal is Zinchenko is so important to them that it's like not even funny. And the weird thing is where does he work best? Does Zinchenko maybe work as a midfielder instead, as opposed to I'm asking him to do a fullback duty as well? Because what they're doing is Gabriel Mangales, the center back, will basically become Arsenal's fullback. He goes really wide, and Saliba does as well. And that's what they're kind of doing. Declan Rice, they're playing high as well, and Declan Rice basically comes like the third center back in that situation. And that's how they're able to give Zinchenko kind of a little bit of a free role. Sometimes he's in midfield, sometimes he's actually their quote unquote fullback or wingback, and everything positive runs through him. And it's just crazy how it's reliant on that because Declan Rice isn't really doing that job. Odegaard isn't necessarily either. Smith Rowe, you see what he offers on the ball, a lot of positive things, but at the same time, he needs to have someone to play him the ball to his feet. So I thought that was I thought there was a chance for him to really have a chance to prove himself and make a point. And he did some good things, but at the same time, a little wanting more. And then they have the big game with Liverpool this Sunday. And does Arteta do the same thing he did in the FA Cup game, which I thought worked pretty well. They played Jorginho that game, and Declan Rice was further forward as a kind of presser. Liverpool also played that game without Van Dijk, but they made Liverpool struggle that game, from what I remember, and at least in that first half. And it's a massive, to say the least, it is a massive game coming up this Sunday. And then with Nottingham, yeah, I think the two errors gifted Arsenal the game, unfortunately for them. And they did some good things. They set up well. They set up narrow to make it hard for Arsenal to play through with Odegaard and ESR in the middle. But at the same time, if you're going to give away, if you're gonna make some mistakes that lead to goals, it's not really going to matter. And once they conceded, then you have to change up your game plan entirely. And it's not necessarily easy after you've been defending all game without the ball to all of a sudden have a different mindset. So yeah, it is what it is. I think the positive for them is Awani and Elanga will make them much better, going forward. They've definitely been missing Elanga, and you're missing Awani. It's easy to forget how good he's been, and it's going to be fun to see what they do with Giorena back. So we'll have to see that. And then I'll move on to Man City and Burnley. And Man City did go on to win 3-1 with Alvarez getting two, and then Rodri basically kind of killed the game off, and then Burnley were able to get one in like the 90th minute by Aldakiel. The thing to touch about here is Man United or Man City got John Stones back, and immediately you saw John Stones kind of played. Man City went almost like with a back three, not like John Stones was played at fullback. Rico Lewis was somewhat played as fullback, but he was really in midfield. It was Rico Lewis and Rodri as the midfield, and you had Kevin De Bruyne and Mateus Nunes as kind of like a double 10 with free roles, and then Foden, Doku, and then Alvarez ahead. And it's funny how Kevin De Bruyne coming in just makes everyone else look better again. Mateus Nunes has legs to his game, and he probably had his best game I think as a Man City player. He has a great ball for the first goal. When Holland came in the second half, he had another really good delivery. He made a run and really good delivery into the box that almost set up Holland. And Mateus Nunes was also getting free. He made some really good runs that was able to. He has a lot more pace through his game than maybe I realized. And you surround Kevin De Bruyne with basically people that are willing to run ahead of you. He's going to find you and make things happen. And that was interesting to see because there've been a couple times when you've wondered, is Kovacic going to be this kind of player? This is basically like the Gundogan role almost. You've been wondering who's going to be able to fit in this kind of situation. Everyone was wondering if it was going to be Foden essentially, and they've instead moved Foden a little bit on the wing. But Kevin De Bruyne coming in and basically he leads to all three goals. He has the through ball in the beginning to play Mateus Nunes or plays Foden, and then Foden has through ball to Nunes for the first one. Really good cross and really good finish by Alvarez. Actually, really good run by Alvarez to recognize the little gap in between the two center backs by Burnley. Alvarez has with Holland being out, Alvarez I think is something like 7 goals for his last 8 games, something like that. He certainly enjoyed life without Holland. But everyone looks better with Kevin De Bruyne back and Rodri back. And another thing too is this is maybe the best game that at least Gvardiol had looked until the very end. Gvardiol actually gets skinned a little bit by the David Turner Fofana making a debut for Burnley. But Gvardiol has actually the run that creates the first goal. And the second one, Kevin De Bruyne basically draws a foul, and then it looks like Man City have set up for some kind of a. It looks like they've set up just like a traditional kind of free kick where he's going to cross the ball and send it into the box, and that's what Burnley are expecting. And instead, Alvarez makes a run into basically the penalty area by himself, and Kevin De Bruyne just passes it to him, and then Alvarez is able to just pass it in basically for the second goal. And then in the right at the start of the second half, when basically they kill the game off, it's 30 seconds into the half. Kevin De Bruyne has a really good pass to play in, Phil Foden making a run in behind, and then Foden basically has a cutback ball to Rodri, and Rodri passes it into the top of the box. It's a really good finish by Rodri, and that was basically the game. I mean, Man City weren't necessarily flying per se. They finished with 14 shots and 4 on target. 1.7 xG. But the main thing for them is they're getting healthy again. Holland was able to make a return. I mentioned Kevin De Bruyne too, but John Stones is not an insignificant person to get back, especially for this little stretch of games that they have coming up. Champions League's coming back. They played this game without Kyle Walker. They played this game without Ruben Diaz, Kanji, and you still have those players to come back too. Man, and Jack Grealish was able to make a return as well. Doku started the game, and then Grealish came on for him. They're starting to look strong again, unfortunately, and they're probably going to push Liverpool or Arsenal or whoever to all the way to the end. Uh, and especially with Kevin De Bruyne back, you just it's going to be hard to see who necessarily stops them. The one thing I'm thinking about is they have that return game at Anfield. Now, if Liverpool can just make it where that game is basically the title decider, I do think Liverpool can at least get a point in that game. But we'll have to see. Uh, but I mentioned Mateus Nunes. I mean, it looked different with Mateus Nunes making some runs, and he offered some legs, some pace. Everyone knows what Doku is going to offer, but Doku is going to offer that on the wing. Mateus Nunes was making some runs that were hard to mark through the midfield. And again, this was a little bit what Gunnigan was doing, and he has a great assist for the first goal, and he nearly assisted Holland. And let's see, with Burnley, I think maybe the mistake is to not try the Fofana guy a little bit earlier. Looked like he has some quite good pace to be able to turn Gvardiol at the very end, and they've been missing some balance since they lost Oda, since they lost Koleosho. Odegaard can maybe do something on the left. They need something to be able to do something on the right, and maybe Fofana can do that. I thought he was maybe a striker, but he has such good pace to him. Maybe you can play Fofana on the wing side, and that way you can still play like a Lyle Foster and Dooney. And Dooney had a chance to actually make it maybe 3-1 earlier in the game. It looked like he was in behind, but he wasn't able to chip Ederson. That's unfortunate, but I think the sad thing for Burnley is they've uh, they've shown glimpses, but they haven't necessarily improved. Basically, where they were to start the season is where they are now. And I don't necessarily want to go with company, but you look at Luton have improved dramatically. Sheffield have as well. Burnley just really haven't, and it's kind of unfortunate for them. I do think the job though was really hard. They lost Ian Matson last season, who was only at Dortmund now. Lost Nathan Talla last season, who is now at Leverkusen getting game time. So they lost some quality players that were like their main like wide creators, and that's the reason why they were able to. It's one thing to be good in possession and be kind of a passing side. You need to be able to stretch teams in behind, and you need to have runners. And it's taken a while for them to kind of get used to that. Bringing in Odegaard, he's a young player. The team is just really young, and they had to bring in a lot of replacements. So Amdouni has shown glimpses, but at the same time, he's also kind of young, and so that's where they are with Burnley, and then Brentford and Tottenham is a 5-goal thriller in itself as well. And this was one of the more exciting games in the first half of the season, or in the first week of the season as well. I think that one ended 2-2. That was the first time we saw Ange Ball, and we saw how well this is kind of crazy how the way he's playing these two fullbacks, Udogi and Pedro Porro. He's playing them in midfield, and just the balls over the top, the balls in the wide channels are open all the time. And if Brentford can do this, all other teams can do this. And what we've seen is throughout the season, someone like Assar and Basuma and whoever have been able to come in, and teams haven't been able to do that this year. And for some reason, maybe it was because Assar and Basuma were missing today or this game. That was back on, and that's basically how Brentford played Tottenham in that first half. And it was quite wild how Spurs were doing all this dominate possession with the ball, but at the same time, Brentford are the team that were getting better chances. Even before Maupay scored, they Brentford scored with Waslav, with Jensen with a really nice ball to play in behind. The space was always there, and it's just all you got to do is time your run and time your pass right. And they were just a little before it with Rosloff, but they were able to get it with Malpai, and basically Tony is the one that able to basically does the same kind of run. I don't know if it's Van de Ven who loses Tony, or if it's someone else is playing Tony on, but Tony's on by a couple of feet, and he basically is able to run at the Spurs penalty box, and he has a shot on goal, and that save, but then Maupay is able to quickly, basically pass it in or get the final touch to go in, and Maupay then does something to rattle just everyone on the Spurs, the fans and their players. Basically, he mocks Jamie Madison by doing the little dart throw, and the entire first half was weird because there wasn't a lot of like actual game action that happened. There was a lot of stoppages. Anytime there was a long throw in or kind of a throw in, Brentford were taking a lot of time to kind of kill the game out. They were doing a lot of time wasting just in the first half, and it was getting the crowd antsy. It was getting Spurs antsy a little bit, and it was interesting to see what Ange did at halftime because he did make some adjustments. He brought on Brennan Johnson and he took off Oliver Skip. And the very interesting thing to me, he took off Betancourt too. So he brought on Hoiberg, but he kept Kulishevsky on. And you were wondering, well, how's he going to play Kulishevsky and Madison and Brennan Johnson together? And basically, he played Kulishevsky in midfield, and he played him deeper. Madison was still like the number 10 kind of player. You're wondering maybe Madison's going to be the one that dropped out. And Kulishevsky has kind of become their. I don't really know where you play him, other than like this kind of being like a bit of a knife kind of player because he doesn't offer those runs and he doesn't offer the pace that someone like a Brennan Johnson does. And that's important too because the Spurs get that second goal because of the run that Brennan Johnson makes. Another thing that I was noticing in the first half was Timo Werner. The commentators were even talking about it too. Was not getting a lot of time and space to really run at Brentford being opened because Brentford was sitting really really deep, and were basically allowing or setting up to just have just straight counters. And Werner wasn't really able to do a lot in the first half. The second half completely opened up in a way that I just don't really get why Brentford were this open. I think the first goal even comes from just Spurs have a throw in, and I think it's like Nathan Collins who is just way too high upfield, and Spurs are able to just get a quick switch, and then Udogie has all the space in the world to just run up, make a run up himself, and then he passes it to Werner, and then Werner does a really good job uh, to to uh, to dribble up into the box himself, and then he does the very same pass that he did last week or 2 weeks ago versus versus Man United with Betancourt. He seems to have that. He's really good at kind of timing that pass and threading it in to someone making a run. Udogie continues his run into the box. Jensen is poor here with his marking. Collins, when he gets back, he runs to Timo Werner, not realizing Udogie's probably the bigger threat. And by the time that Ethan Pennock is able to recover, he gets a block, but the block falls to Udogie. Udogie's able to turn it back in, so that makes it 1-1. And then quickly following, again, Timo Werner's able to get the ball in loads of space, and he basically runs all the way down the wing. Spurs again are just completely undressed, and then he has a really good. Werner has an amazing square ball to find pick out Brennan Johnson making a run back post, and unfortunately for Spurs, I mean, unfortunately for Brentford is I think it's Ben Mee is more concerned about where Werner is than necessarily the man behind him, and he loses Brennan Johnson, and it's just they were completely undressed there, and then Spurs get the third one with Richarlison, and here it's the guy that Neil Maupay and everyone kind of goaded. Uh, I think maybe it's Udogie again. Someone makes again. He has a complete run into the channel with all the space, and he's able to find a really good pass to Madison into the box, and from there, uh, Madison basically has some clever feet, and he gets the first shot off. That's blocked, but then Richarlison's there for the kind of the tap in. And then Ivan Toney makes it 2-3 after Udogie had a very interesting game because he set up basically three of Spurs goals, but he had the mistake made for the Maupay goal, and then he basically passed it to Ivan Toney, where he's not offsides, and Toney was able to finish to make it 2-3. And Brentford had a chance to maybe even get a third at the very end. They forced a pretty good save there, but this was weird because the way Brentford set up, they set up to basically be really defensive, and they were able to get that early goal. And you're wondering, okay, Spurs are going to really struggle to break down this Brentford side, and instead Brentford allowed themselves to be really opened up in a very foolish way. So I thought that was kind of a negative for them. They had that good win versus Forest. Thomas Frank spoke a little bit after the game. He liked the performance here. He thought it was a better performance than necessarily the good performance versus Forest. I don't necessarily know if I agree. And then Tottenham get the good win versus Man United. And unlucky versus Man City. There was weird. People were going at them saying they didn't play well versus Man City because they only had like maybe a shot the entire game. But both teams, that was a pretty good game for the neutral as far as I shouldn't say that because there weren't a lot of shots, but both teams were working like crazy to try to run and win the ball back, and neither team were going long. Both teams, Man City and Spurs, were trying to play their way out of pressure the entire game, and some of the passing and quick movement was all game was quite risky and quite good. It just wasn't necessarily leading to scoring opportunities. But I thought Spurs played well in that game, and here you see them with Jamie Madison back. You're starting to see them actually get a little healthy again. They have Mickey Van de Ven and Christian Romero back, and this is the side that was leading the league at earlier in the season with everyone back healthy. So can Spurs can go back on another kind of run? We'll have to see. I think there's a weird stat that Jamie Madison hasn't necessarily lost when he's been able to play in the second half. Because the only game that he lost when he actually did start was the Chelsea game, and he had to go off. Or when he went off, he I think they were still winning at that point. So that's worth kind of talking about. And with Brentford, I think it was unfortunate for them they were playing Tottenham because Lewis Potter isn't really a wingback or defensive kind of guy himself, and the guy they brought in is Sergio Reguilon, and he wasn't allowed to play because he's still a Spurs player. So no really changes at least to start this game for Brentford. Pennant Collins and me, the back three, and for the most part, the first time that I've really Brentford spent a lot of money to bring Nathan Collins to their squad from Wolves, and he had a horrid show, with, too many times he was just way too upfield, and that was kind of the way that was basically how you allowed Spurs to run at you a little bit, and just the marking was hard. Uh, Brentford with 9 shots in 5, Tottenham with 19 and 5, but 13 in the second half. The changes that Ange made, to play Kulusevski in midfield, he's a little more creative. One of the actual goals that Spurs scored actually comes from a brilliant ball by Kulusevski. It might even be the second or the third. I think it's the third goal where it's created by a really good ball by Kulusevski to play in Udogi, making that run. So with Tottenham, it was they get Skip and they took out Skip and then Betancourt to bring in Hoiberg and Johnson, and that really did kind of change the tempo of the game. Timo Werner experiment is working out for them as well. Brennan Johnson coming in, adding some pace into their attack, and then Richarlison, you blink and he's got 7 goals for his last 7 games. So just everything is starting to work magic again for Ange Postecoglou. The only maybe negative is in the first half they were struggling defending the wide channels, but in the second half they didn't necessarily have that problem. And Udogi had an interesting game to say the least. Basically involved for like four of these goals to Brentford's, and then three for Spurs. So there you go. And with Brentford, I do think the thing uh, Frank said, I think hold some water. They did do some good things. It was good for them to have the core back. They have Jensen back, they have Norgard back, Tony back, they have Ben Mee back, but are missing Bremo and Weza still. Unfortunately for Brentford, it looks like they were going to be able to sign an exciting attacking player in Antonio Nusa. And weirdly enough, it looked like maybe a medical was failed and they weren't able to get that deal done. And it's possible that they're looking at the future. They might be looking at missing Tony and might be playing a Kevin Schade or Wisa through the middle, and maybe they saw someone like a Nusa on the left and Bremo on the right being a pretty good way to attack teams in the future. And we'll see maybe if they go for him again in the summer, but they might have a little bit more competition. So that was little unfortunate news for them because it looked like that was going to be a pretty exciting signing, at least in that perspective. And then Another thing too is Maupay is starting to really hit consistent form for them, so that's positive. He's a bit of a shithouser as well, which we saw. But I thought in this game the poor tracking back from midfield was really striking, and it didn't make sense for Brentford to be this cut open. And it just you allowed you. Why would you give Werner space to attack you, especially when you're up a goal? Uh, it was a bit shocking to say the least. But hey, good for Spurs to be able to exploit that a little bit. And then I will move finally get to Liverpool and Chelsea, and this game, to set it up, has been a draw 7 times in a row. I think the last time the Liverpool actually won it outright, not going into extras, was Thiago's debut, and Chelsea beat Liverpool to Caicedo, beat Liverpool to Roman Lavia at the start of the season. Their fans were having fun because so you see the L, you see the C, and I think the so LFC. The other one that they beat, it was Roman Lavia and Casado. Maybe is it Enzo? The fans were having fun, basically calling their midfield LFC, and so Enzo Fernandez. That's it. And they outplayed Liverpool in the opening game of the season. So going into this, it was weird because I think a lot of Liverpool fans were just kind of a little unnerved. This is the first official game that Klopp has played was playing in, or Klopp's players were playing in since the announcement as well. They were able to get by Norwich in the FA Cup game. One of the stars in that FA Cup game was Connor Bradley, funny enough. And here, man, did he just kind of announce himself in a big way in this game. I mean, the first goal comes from Jota. It's a very similar fashion to like other games where Liverpool have all this possession, all this havoc and chaos in front of a team's back line, but they aren't able to necessarily score. Darwin Núñez just hit the post like 4 times in this game. He just can't. He just can't catch a break. And you needed at least someone to get that first goal. And Jota just basically just owned Thiago Silva, and I believe it's Badiashile, and he's able to get the first one, and then Connor Bradley gets the second one, and then in the second half, Slabashai with a really easy header set up by Connor Bradley as well. And Kuka made it 4-1. There was a couple of chances, a couple of shouts for PKs in this game as well that Chelsea fans were upset about online. And then Luis Diaz made it 4-1 set up by Nunez. So Nunez again is chaotic as hell. Still sets up a goal, hit the post 4 times. One of them being a PK that he missed. Jota created the PK, but at the same time, this game was not competitive at all. It could have finished, to be honest, 4-3 because I thought the 2 PK shots were legit. Van Dijk got very lucky in my opinion, but I think they finished something like 30 shots to maybe 4 or 5. Liverpool just absolutely straight dominated in a way that just they didn't allow Chelsea to breathe. But you look at trying to look at it a bit of from a neutral perspective. The way that I was looking at Chelsea is I saw a theme that I'll get to. I think the way that Liverpool kind of exploited them is one, playing Cole Palmer is this like kind of false nine player who's going to run to the ball. Madueke is a ball to feet player. He doesn't like really making those runs behind. Sterling is really the only guy to do that. Now they do have Nicholas Jackson to come in. Maybe he'll kind of do that later on. And Cuckoo, at least when he gets the ball into the box, is creative. But how do you get the ball into the box is the problem. You don't have anyone making runs to stretch a back line to push him back. So when Liverpool were able to just kind of put pressure and just constantly, and there was no real way for Chelsea to push out. Another thing too was Chelsea were not able to play a bit of a high line. And so maybe Chelsea would be able to get through the first couple of pressures, but at the same time, Liverpool were able to recover really quickly, and then they'd have to go backwards. And more often than not, I thought Liverpool were basically targeting Thiago Silva. And so there were a couple of times when it looked like Jota was trying to make a run in between Badiashile or Nunez, trying to make it in between Badiashile and Silva specifically. And Badiashile was so worried about that, he had to shift over. Chilwell was struggling with Connor Bradley, and he had to do all of that. So they were basically targeting those two and trying to make runs in between those. And Badiashile couldn't let Silva be by himself. And I think Chelsea basically have a Man United Harry Maguire kind of problem. Only he's 39 and Brazilian, and he's been probably Chelsea's most I want to say important, but liked I guess the players over the last few years. But and I think I've talked about him before, but so I don't necessarily want to do an agenda. But in this game specifically, I just thought he was horrid. Jota went after him, and basically got the first goal. Connor Bradley, basically, Chilwell Jota runs into Chilwell and basically takes out Batshuayi, and, that's how they get the second goal with Bradley, and just, too often or not, I thought, he was playing Silva was, like, the furthest man back, and so Chelsea's just they were disconnected. They were not able to just play tight and compact, and, so that was kind of a problem, and then another thing too was Caicedo and Enzo and even Gallagher do not really, at least in this game, were not really in sync. And Liverpool, it seemed like they anytime the ball was in the midfield or in the kind of the second or I don't say the final third, the middle third of the pitch, basically around the halfway line, it always felt like Liverpool had 4 or 5 people around the ball where Chelsea had 1 or 2, and just they were able to just outnumber them the entire game. And that really was basically how the game went. It was constant turnover after turnover, and Bradley there would always be kind of a space down that right hand channel for Bradley to time that run and to make it. And Liverpool just kind of just destroyed Chelsea by doing that in a way that again, this is probably back to the old Liverpool with Trent being 20 years old when he was kind of the bombing kind of touchline winger essentially, and that's what Bradley was again, and we saw this versus Norwich. He's good defensively as well. He was quite good versus Martinelli when he came on a couple of weeks ago versus the FA Cup game. Uh, it was good versus Bournemouth. And then here, all he's done is he's led to something like 4 or 5 assists now as well in those few games. But good defensively, he wasn't allowing Chilwell to do anything. He wasn't allowing Sterling to do anything. When Mudryk came on, he wasn't really allowing Mudryk to do anything. And what he does is by being able to be that bombing player on the touchline, that allows Szoboszlai to play a little more inside. That's basically why you see Szoboszlai get the goal that he got. Uh, I'm thinking of someone like Salah being able to come into to the team, and he's going to enjoy someone like Bradley if Klopp decides to play Bradley when Trent Alexander-Arnold is still available. You could still play Trent somewhere in midfield instead. And on the flip side, Gomez has done really really well is on the left side, but at the same time, you saw it versus Norwich. When Robinson comes in, he's got a left foot, and basically he does the same thing. He can do those bombing runs as well. Now you both don't have to do it together because that can kind of leave you vulnerable as well. But that would make a Liverpool different because when I saw Robinson come in this game and versus Norwich, is that immediately helps whoever's playing on the left side where they can have more freedom to do stuff in the half space. So someone like a Gakpo, I think that's even where the third or fourth goal comes from. Gakpo gets the ball, I think from Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he's got someone, I think it's Malo Gusto, completely on him, and he doesn't really have options. And what he does is he has Robinson making that overlap run, and he plays Robinson in, and Robinson has the cross. Actually, this isn't a goal, but it should have been. Robinson has the cross, and basically he finds Nunez, and Nunez again hits the post. But that kind of overlap and threat it frees up everyone else, and Liverpool haven't really necessarily had that the last, or at least this season. In fact, one of the weird complaints I've had, not really a complaint, but kind of fear, I guess I could say, is I thought Liverpool have lacked width in a few of these games. I don't really love when Salah is forced to be a touchline player or Szoboszlai is forced to be a touchline player to make room for Trent kind of playing inverted. Or Gomez doesn't really have a left foot. He likes putting it on his right foot. So he's not going to make those overlap runs either out wide to cross the ball in. So you're forcing like a Diaz to be on the touchline or a Gakpo or whoever's playing on there. It changes the dynamic a lot when you can have your fullbacks actually be the wingers essentially. So it was a throwback a little bit. Bradley offered them something that I don't think Chelsea would have been able to. I don't think Liverpool would have played this game with Trent Alexander-Arnold playing instead. I'm not necessarily going to say it's not like they wouldn't have won, played any differently. But at least in that respect, I don't think they would have been able to target, I guess, Chelsea in that manner. I mean, before Trent got injured, I was thinking he was maybe player of the season. But all the things that Trent has done has been really in a midfield role. It hasn't really been him being out wide, as good as he is at that job. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Klopp does going forward. I don't necessarily want to touch about the game that much. I think I've already talked about it a little bit. I mean, 28 shots and 13 on target. Chelsea with 4 and 3. And Cuckoo came in, at least gave them something to be positive about. I mean, passes were about the same, 472 at 85% to 483, 86%. But yeah, just overall thoughts was this was a really good display of quick, clever passes, touches, physical challenges to win the ball back, legs to break up field, make runs. Diaz, Jota, McAllister were putting a clinic, and I thought how to turn with the ball too. That was showing up. Bradley wing shifts, allowing Schloboschlei to play more centrally. That basically led to the third goal. Liverpool's attack without Salah. There's a note I had is it's not better, but it is different. It's harder to predict where the runs are going to come from because they're fluid. Jota will play on the right or play in the middle or the left. Nunez was making runs there. Diaz will play centrally, maybe come down in midfield. You saw Jota actually dropping into midfield in a way that Salah never really does at Chelsea, which is outnumbered in midfield in that situation too. And this is where someone like maybe a Badiashile or even a Thiago Silva were struggling because you couldn't have the center backs come in when those players were dropping to look for the ball, and they're really good at turning with the ball too. So Chelsea were outnumbered in midfield anyways, and the reason why you couldn't do that is because you always had Nunez as the threat in behind, and that's where just the threat prevents a back line from being able to push up like that. And so Chelsea didn't have that with Cole Palmer. Maybe they would have with Jackson. Liverpool had that with Nunez, and that's the reason why, given uh, the many chances that he misses, it's worth it to stomach it. So I mean, it seems like Klopp has gone from being efficient. He doesn't really have efficient strikers. He never really. And Mane wasn't efficient. What he has is high volume creators, and that's what Nunez is. And he just terrifies a back line. And as long as he has his legs. Now, if Nunez loses his pace, then I'll worry. But as long as he has his legs and engine, he's always going to be a threat, and he's always going to keep that back line honest. So this was a pretty good game plan, and Chelsea just were not ready for it. I mean, Connor Bradley was man of the match. Speaking of him, 4 chances created, which is unreal. But he's also he's good in possession. He can break lines. A couple of chances when the ball was maybe overhit. He had some really good touch to bring it down, and he seems to be quite good at advancing upfield and proper touchline, bombing winger again. I mean, Diego Jota. Liverpool create all these chances for Nunez, and Nunez misses it. You need someone to finish eventually, and that's what Jota is. Jota, when he gets a look and sniff into the box, he finishes them, and they really do need that because I don't really trust Diaz to Luis Diaz to necessarily do that. And the other thing to say is the speed that they can turn the ball over and break in numbers. It's back again. They can crowd the ball again. They have depth in legs again, which they just did not have last season. And the only maybe negative is McAllister didn't suffer a near injury scare. And the reason to talk about that is, man, has he turned around. And I didn't think he could do this job, to be honest. I was really worried about this. It's not just being good on the ball, being able to, when Liverpool are trying to build up, trying to be someone to look at the pass through, to quickly turn and to advance the ball upfield. He's not just good at that. He's also it helps when you have someone that in the middle of the field that's really good at distributing too. And he has a couple amazing threaded passes to play in Nunez. I think actually that's where the fourth goal comes from. Just a brilliant through ball. But this is the second week in a row he's 11 for 19 in ground duels. He did something like that versus Bournemouth too. He's always getting the ball out his feet. I think he had 7 for 8 tackles. He's become amazing at winning the ball back. And the only negative is his body built to necessarily do that over the season? Because he's had a couple knee scares. I think he clattered into someone's knee. I think it's Casade in this game. But man, because this is why I wanted Casado. I wanted in the summertime, I wanted him to maybe kind of be the dual winner to allow Alexis to play somewhere else. And I mean, McAllister is showing that he can be as good of a six as anyone in the league, Declan Rice included. Now, I shouldn't necessarily say that because they played Declan Rice this game and coming up, and Declan Rice might I don't know might beat him or might get the might get the better of him. We'll have to see. But I mean, 11 for 19 with him is unreal. He's playing a position he not really built to play, and he's been unreal. And so yeah, I'm trying not to get overblown with praise too much. I mean, Darwin Núñez hit the post 4 times, and the way to think about it is he created 4 chances to score at least, and he did have that assist to Diaz. And a take I had is this is a mix of what Klopp has created, but is also a sign of maybe what the future can be like without him. I mean, there's no Salah this game, no Trent Alexander until late, no Robinson until late. They thumped him by 29 shots to 3, and the team just has legs and physicality again. And it's just what he's built up has been just yeah, it's fun. It's fun to watch. It's a team that's gets good technically, but also they just they looks like they tower over teams. They looks like they're taller. They can run more than others, and yeah, it just seems they Chelsea just had no. It felt like Liverpool were playing with extra players. In many of this games. So yeah. Up next is Arsenal, and they probably have revenge on their minds. And the interesting thing here is Klopp's going to have Robinson fit. He's going to have Alexander Arnold fit, and the question is does either start or both start on the weekend? Given the jobs that Gomez and Bradley have done, that actually speaks of what they've done. They've been amazing. And can you move Trent to midfield as a permanent transition now? That could be in the cards. Maybe not necessarily for this game, but soon that could be in the cards as well. I mean, I don't. I need to not go overblown, but overboard. But I look at Martinelli, and I think maybe Bradley would be better just defensively on him. Because sometimes Trent can be got at. I don't know. I don't want to necessarily go overboard, but I've been won by overpraised by what Bradley's done. He's been amazing. Gomez is he's good on the ball, and maybe he doesn't have a left foot, but in a weird way, they've kind of flipped it where in the past, maybe it was always it's always been one of the it's not really always been both necessarily, making the runs ahead. What they've done is instead of Trent being the inverted guy and you having the left back, kind of being the winger, what they've done is they've moved it to where Bradley has kind of the Robinson role, and they had Gomez kind of playing in midfield in this game. So, yeah, I don't know. With Robinson back, how much does that change? Because they sometimes do stick with a back three. Sometimes they do move Gomez into midfield. Sometimes he is kind of being out wide. Robinson back, would that change the dynamic a little bit? We'll have to see. And I think another thing to say about with Bradley, what being able to play means. It doesn't you don't have to necessarily play in the best league to develop. He was on loan to is it Bolton? He was on loan to a club in the championship, and he was player of the season for them as a 21-year-old or 19-year-old. And just because you get game minutes, you get situations that you can't necessarily get in training, and you're able to get the muscle memory kind of set in stone when you're young. And, man, does he looks set to play senior football just right now. And, because it's been 3 or 4 games now, and he hasn't made a mistake. Now, maybe he got beat a little bit for, I can think for Norwich. Uh, but, this is quite impressive, and, yeah, Klopp is leaving the team or the club in a pretty good situation, so whoever comes in, he's gonna have some keys to like, a Lamborghini, so we'll have to see if they're able to, someone like Alonso plays different than football. To be honest, he doesn't necessarily. I think he plays with 2 midfielders instead of 3. He doesn't necessarily play with wide creators. He plays with kind of wing backs. He plays a back 3, at least at Leverkusen, from what I've seen. And at least in the game that I watched on the weekend a couple of weeks ago, uh, he basically had double tens. He doesn't really have he didn't have someone. He didn't have like his attackers, going forward. Now they're also without Boniface in that game, and maybe it's just kind of a player personnel thing. But one thing to say is the speed and quickness that they're able to pass the ball was amazing. It's something that I wanted to say with the Arsenal when I was speaking about Arsenal. Granit Xhaka is so much better on the ball than I realized, and he's kind of an orchestrator in that Leverkusen midfield, and just him and Florian Wirtz, and just the way the quickness that they're able to just pass the ball just one touch. It's quite enjoyable. It's like a mix of Spanish football and but they still have legs. They still get the width from Frimpong making runs. Um, it's that could be interesting, to say the least. But enough of that, and then, quickly with Chelsea, let's see how we're doing for time, and, it's probably not great. It's not bad. Uh, I think the positive is it can't get much worse. Chelsea's build-up, though, is weird. It's kinda 3 center backs and then Caicedo kinda playing midfield by himself. Enzo's further ahead. I would've figured it would be kind of the opposite. Uh but really, I think Thiago Silva has to hang up the boots. He couldn't follow Liverpool's attackers dropping into midfield. And like I said, because of Nunez's pace next to him, Jota and Diaz lived off this. They were constantly dropping in the midfield. And one thing that Jota and Diaz especially, but Jota has learn how to get the ball and quickly turn and not lose it. And the couple times when Diaz was actually, I think that even where the second goal comes from, Diaz gets the ball from McAllister, and he has such a perfect turn that he's able to get himself in between the ball and say a Casado or even an Enzo that is somewhat close to him, but he's able to shield it. And it's just simple things like that. Like if he turns the opposite way, he's turning into trouble, but he's able to turn around them. And but by being able to do that, Liverpool are able to get the ball and advance it, or to be able to find extra numbers there, and then from there you can basically get a run at a back line that just doesn't really have a lot of pace and that is not really going to engage them, and that was happening a lot too. So Chelsea, I do think, have a Harry Maguire problem, as I mentioned, and you can't press with him. You can't play in a high line with him. The positive though is Nkunku did look good when he came on. I thought Carney, Chukwuemeka, who they've missed since August, came on. He actually had the assist to Nkuku. Uh, I do think Lavia to come back maybe could change things. I don't really understand how Enzo works. If you're not going to have people to make runs off the ball going forward, maybe that's where Jackson can come in and really improve them. Enzo is not. Enzo is known for being really good with being able to progress the ball upfield with really good switches and long balls, and just Chelsea don't have runners to do that. In the first game, when Liverpool played Chelsea, and Chelsea kind of, basically dominated that game, to be honest. Chelsea had Reece James, who was able to do that. And, they've to say that they've been missing him all season is a dramatic understatement. I think I basically hit on that every time I talk about Chelsea, but it's true. They have been missing him. And, I mean, they did have a couple PK shots. There was a Mudryk chance. I mean, there were chances, for Chelsea, but, they were far and few between, and Liverpool had chances as well. Nunes had 4 at least. And, it was only a year ago where, this was a 0-0 game at Anfield, and, Chelsea, I thought, actually, dominated that game. They again, had the better, I thought, in the first game in August, and, what a difference just, a few short months has made. And, just again, I do think it's too many ball feet players. I think I mentioned that. Someone like a Nicholas Jackson does kinda help with that a little bit, but, they're struggling, and, I mean, I don't necessarily wanna dunk too much because Liverpool still have to play them, basically a couple weeks from now in the Carabao Cup final. Liverpool probably won't have Salah. Maybe the bounces don't go their way, that game. 'Cause, finals are weird. Finals are not always the better team wins. Finals can just be, where the ball bounces, essentially. Liverpool got the breaks a couple years ago when, Chelsea, looked like they had won with, Lukaku scoring, and I think they very bailed out by a strange offside VAR call that I didn't necessarily I didn't agree with either, just as a Liverpool fan or a neutral fan. So it was close a couple of years ago, but, Chelsea do look a mess right now, and Pochettino doesn't necessarily have them playing better. So we'll have to see. And then with, Fulham and Everton, I should be able to speak a little bit more about the game because it was 0-0, but also Fulham and Everton, I think, had like 45 shots between the two of them. There were a couple amazing saves by Pickford. I think Fulham were probably the better team, but 4 big chances for them, 6 big chances for Everton. Calvin Lewin can't get going for them. I think they're missing Decore. Uh, they're missing in the core of their midfield. No Onana. I think Onana is actually hurt, but no Decore, no Idrissa Gueye. They played. I think it was James Garner and Dwight McNeil kind of in midfield. They were able to create a lot, but only 21 shots and 4 on target. Fulham with 25 shots and 6. That's a lot of shots, but between the two, Fulham with 70% of the ball. Uh, Fulham didn't have the best go of it in the FA Cup game versus Newcastle. It looked like Marcus Silva was actually resting players for this game, and they outplayed Everton, but at the same time, they weren't able to maybe get the 3 points that they wanted. And it looks like Jimenez actually got hurt, but so I don't necessarily know if the reason why they moved to yesterday is that, but it looks like they brought in Amanda Broja on a loan to maybe kind of fix some of their striker problems or maybe give Jimenez some competition. So you look at that, 25 shots only. Well, they did get 6 on target, but 25 shots and weren't able to score. Maybe Amanda Broja would put some away. He does have a good. He is good in the air, which we've seen for Chelsea. So. Anyways, that's pretty much it. That's where we're at. I did go a little long, but it is what it is. The Klopp news. I probably spent like 30 minutes on that. I'll be back next week to talk about what happened on the weekend and Liverpool and Arsenal. So looking forward to that. And then so that'll be it. And stop recording. Whoops. Oh, you stay squatty and stop recording.